we're recording. Sorry it took me a little bit longer to get started this morning. Not feeling 100% great. I don't know if I've got like a summer cold or what it is. My wife said she had the sniffles too, which is bad because we have a baby. I don't want the baby to get sick. I don't even know what I got. I didn't go to the doctor. I'm like my father. I don't like go to the doctor just because I got the sniffles.
Maybe the baby gave
The baby could have got me sick. Yeah, that's true. Baby, she's at home all the time, so could have come in contact with any number of things that, like us, like when we pick her up. Actually, that would still be us. Midterm grades. I did grade the midterms right after class, and I put them on Blackboard. It says in a column in your grades that says midterm without curve. So it's the midterm grade without the curve. Although I'm going to let you know the curve's not going to be that high. Pretty sure there was a 96 on that thing.
What was the lowest grade?
And I would not suggest berating the people you think are good at English. That's not fair. You should just be better. And that's the way to tackle the final. Let's see. I don't know if I'm just grading little bits at a time. I don't know if I'm grading little bits at a time, and that seems... What's happening?
I'm complimenting Enrique.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm grading little bits at a time, and that's what makes it seem like I'm not grading very much, or if there's just not very much coming in for me to grade. But I feel like I was grading like... I mean, I may have done 25 discussion posts yesterday. I just didn't feel like it. So if you're getting behind on things, catch up. Like 20 of them? Oh, that's pretty good. That's about what I could, I guess, hope for. Let's just hope that it's not all the same 5 people every time that are missing. It probably is. What we're going to do today, well, I mean, I guess, do I need to... I don't. Here's what I think I'm going to do. I think, depending on how long it takes to talk about John Donne and Ben Jonson, I don't like Ben Jonson very much. I will probably literally just read his short poems and then do Inviting a Friend for Supper, which I find quite clever. And I don't think anybody who read it caught exactly what was happening. Maybe you did, but you just didn't say it. And then on John Donne, I think there might have been one person who caught what was truly happening in Elegy 19, but nobody said that either. But I'm going to probably go through more full on John Donne because I like John Donne quite a bit. Let's see. But I'm wondering is whether or not I need to spend time going over like the writing of the research paper when I've already got videos that I can put at the end that are going to be more detailed than what I can provide anyway.
You should probably do that.
I think I'm just gonna, is anybody gone and noticed that, like, you know, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna write the critical evaluation, let me go, and he said he added material, I'll go look, and then I've added the material. Has anybody actually done that?
No.
Okay, but you know that it's available there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the same thing today after class. I'll probably add like my discussion of the research paper to the end of this video from another class where I had more time to talk about it. And since this is a hybrid course, you know, we aren't doing 2 different class days a week, but that's being supplemented by online materials, essentially, with the discussion posts and the quizzes and the video additions that I make. So like when I add something to a video, technically you're supposed to be responsible for, you know, watching that addition as part of the coursework. So I'll just say it's required that you go and you watch the research paper discussion as to what to do there. But of course, you know, that's going to be on you. I have noticed it seems like from the papers I've been getting, it seems like people aren't watching the video editions. Even some students, I think that, like, generally speaking, get higher grades, have been getting lower grades on the first cut before revision, because I think it's been a long time since they've seen the videos and aren't rewatching the videos. But I don't know, that might be just an assumption that I'm making. So the research paper will be due on Sunday. I did not get as many research paper plannings as I thought I would. There was one that I haven't graded yet on the Research Paper Plannings. It's about Gulliver's Travels because I have to ask that person a question during the 5-minute soda break before I can know exactly how to grade it. But then once I do, I'll know. Trying to figure out. I have had confirmation that the discussion post links I've been sending people aren't working. They used to. I don't know if it's something they changed on Blackboard, but I'm going to try to do some messing around with Magnus Baraka's account and see if I can make it work for him. I haven't tested it yet. I don't even know if it doesn't work for Magnus Baraka, but I'll test it out and see if it does or doesn't. And if it doesn't work for Magnus Baraka, I'll just keep working with it until I can figure out how to make it work for Magnus Baraka, and once it does, I'll let y'all know that way. Because of the quizzes, it's easy. I just unlock it for whatever individuals miss it. But with the discussion post, they won't let me do that. So usually I've just given people the link. But now it's acting like the link won't work either. Bless you. Is there any questions before we get into Ben Jonson, then John Donne? Let's get into Ben. Yes. Oh, I wore contacts today. I wasn't feeling like messing with glasses. A lot of people tell me that they're like the opposite. Like when they're feeling lazy, they wear glasses. But I'm the opposite. Like when I'm feeling late, I know that my glasses, I like the way they look on my face, but I have to push them up constantly and finagle with them. And I don't see as clear out of them. But the contacts, I see clearer and I don't have to touch my face as much. So it's actually when I'm feeling lazier or like I'm not feeling great, I wear contacts.
Yeah, I'm definitely the opposite.
Yeah, like we were like, so when you show up in glasses, I guess I should assume most people just kind of feeling a little haggard that day. Not everybody. I mean, if you wear glasses every day, it's different. I was just, you're like, hey, now, hey. Glasses all the time, that's completely different. Any other questions? Questions about English are welcome as well. No, that was cool. I mean, I would wonder the same thing. It would bother me the whole class. No? Let's move on to Ben Jonson. I'm going to try to go through these really quick on page 710 and 711, at least in my book. Let's see. Yeah, they look to be the same in the other edition as well. I'm going to go through To My Book, On My First Daughter, To John Donne, and On My First Son. I mostly think that he's cheesy and fishing for compliments or something like that. This is what I don't like about him. So this is like a kind of a preface poem to his book. And he says, to my book. And this was common at the time, so I'll give him that. It's no big deal. He says, it will be looked for book when some but see thy title epigrams, and named of me. Thou shouldst be bold, licentious, full of gall, wormwood and sulphur, sharp and toothed withal. Become a petulant thing, hurl ink and wit as madmen stones, not caring whom they hit. So he says, based on like my name being attached to that, that's what people would expect, is that this is how it would be written. He said, deceive their malice who could wish it so, and by thy wiser temper, let men know thou art not covetous, of least self-fame made from the hazard of another's shame. Apparently there were people who were writing books of poetry who were insulting others in order to get fame on their part. You know, so they weren't good originally, they were just good as people who were insulting other people or making using other people's works as a way of elevating theirs. And he says, don't let me do that. And don't let me do the kinds of things that they do, like much less with lewd, profane, and beastly phrase to catch the world's loose laughter or vain gaze. He's like, I don't want people's loose laughter. I don't want their vain gaze. I just want their legit good feelings about well-written works. That's what I want. He that departs with his own honesty for vulgar praise doth it too dearly buy. Now, I have a problem with this because I think he's doing the very thing he's saying not to do. He's like, some people out there are insulting people to get fame. That's not what I'm doing. But you're talking about the people who are out there insulting the people. So he's doing like meta insulting. You know, it's like when you make like a passive-aggressive comment to somebody, you know, about... Everybody knows passive-aggressive, right? It's where instead of saying, you suck and I don't like you, you go like, oh, that looks nice. You know, or it's like, you know, they're like, wait, does it really look nice? Or like, no, you look like somebody would like looking at you, but like not everybody. It's just a way around. A backhanded compliment, as some people have heard it called. But this, I think, is like meta insulting. He's insulting somebody for their insults, and so he feels like that exempts him from. Like I'm not doing that because I'm only insulting them for their insults, but that makes you an insulter too. So hypocrite. I really have a problem with hypocrisy, I guess, in poetry. I don't know why, I always do. Big problem for me. And then we have On My First Daughter. Spoiler alert, his daughter died. So it said that it's probably written in the late 1590s in Jonson's Roman Catholic period. I don't know why I need to know that for this poem. But it says, here lies to each her parents' ruth, or grief, Mary the daughter of their youth. Yet all heaven's gifts being heaven's due, it makes the father less to rue, or regret. At 6 months in, she parted hence with safety of her innocence. With safety of her innocence, I really feel like I'd be more pissed than that. Like, it's almost like the way, if you heard like, people, the Christian idea of like, if a baby dies, it dies innocent. It doesn't die with like the sins of the world. I'm not 100% sure how that works in Catholicism because I know babies get baptized, and so I don't know if they have sin. I don't know if it's like a preemptive baptism that like protects them when they get older, or if it's a baptism that literally they need protection from sin when they're a baby. I'm not 100% sure how that works. So y'all would know that, but I know like I'm just talking about specifically what I know is like Church of Christ baptism. It's like once you're older and you feel like you need to be baptized, you baptize, and so until you're baptized, or if you're not baptized, at least before you're sinful, before you have knowledge of your own sin, you're supposedly innocent. And so he's like, oh well, good that she died at 6 months old, so she's preserved her innocence. I don't know. Maybe it's just as a father, I just get pissed at that. I'm like, I don't think that I would ever find any solace in my child's death. And I don't know exactly how long it had been since she died that he wrote this. But it says of their youth, so maybe he wrote it years later. He says, whose soul heaven's queen, whose name she bears, Mary, in comfort of her mother's tears, hath placed amongst her virgin train, where, while that severed doth remain, this grave partakes the fleshly birth, which cover lightly, gentle earth. I don't know. Like a common sentiment in Latin epitaphs was cover lightly, gentle earth. I don't know. Maybe it's just because he's not the same kind of father that I am. It pisses me off the way he's talking about this. And he could have written it years later, but I feel like I would have been a little more pissed. Maybe he didn't write this immediately, so he's just looking back later going, actually when I think about it, it's better for her, that she did die at such a young age and not... But that, I don't know. That seems kind of weird to me. In a religion where, Jesus is the exemplar, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus, the guy who lived an entire full life and managed not to sin. Sir Gawain is like, we didn't talk about this, I don't think we may have, but Sir Gawain is almost like our Jesus character. But he's not quite Jesus, right? Because he does make a mistake at the end. And so it's like he's like our Jesus, but he makes a mistake, so he's human like us. And a lot of people say Jesus is human like us, but there's still that disconnect. We can't ever fully feel like Jesus is like, I could meet Jesus on the side of the street and be like, hey, what's up, Jesus? Hey, you're just a guy like me, I know, right? There's still that elevation. For this right here, I had a place I was going with that. I just still feel like most people think to live a life is better than to have died as an infant. I don't think anybody's like, good, they died as an infant. They got out quick. I've never heard that before. It's always tragic. It's always horrible. And nobody ever thinks, thank heaven, even if you think about it, even like the people who, I guess people who are trying to avoid situations like this are the people who believe politically in abortion. Like they don't want to see like a baby die. So I guess if they're going to be brought into a situation where it's a horrible situation, this kind of thing might happen, then they're like, okay, abortion if the mother isn't on the right life situation, okay. But even like those who believe not in abortion, like no abortion, like in the baby is born. I think that there's an assumption the baby will live a life after that, right? Not that the baby would die 6 months in. I mean, if that was the case in every single situation where somebody had an abortion, maybe people would change their minds. But there's no way of tracking that. Or there maybe is, but we aren't doing it. So I mean, it's still like nobody likes to think about baby death. Nobody does. And so I just feel like to say that, she made it out with safety of her innocence and we're so blessed for that. Bull crap. And it just pisses me off as a dad. And he writes the damn thing again later. In fact, let's go down to On My First Son. Farewell, thou child of my right hand. A literal translation of the Hebrew name Benjamin, which implies the meaning dexterous or fortunate. The boy was born in 1596 and died on his birthday in 1603 at 7, I guess. On his birthday? Enjoy. Farewell, thou child of my right hand, enjoy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. 7 years thou wert lent to me. That pisses me off. Like, Jesus or God let me borrow you for 7 years and they took you back. I don't know why that pisses me off so much. But he is writing this much, much later because it's like he died in 1603 and this was published at least in 1616. He says, you were lent to me, and I at thee pay, exacted by that fate on thy just day. Oh, could I lose all, Father, now? For why will man lament the state he should envy, to have so soon escaped the world's and flesh's rage, and if no other misery yet age? Is life really that bad? To hopefully we can escape it?
This is 1600s.
I'm pretty sure like.
But even the number, even like you hear about the life expectancy, those numbers are far skewed because most people who did die died in infancy. And so most people live normal lives like we do today, like a 60, 70 kind of life. It was only because so many children died in infancy that the life expectancy was so low. If you got 10 births, 7 of which are infant deaths, and 3 lived to 60 and 70, that brings the life expectancy way down. I don't know, it just pisses me off. It's like, I should totally envy that you died so soon. Yeah, but if he died so soon, you wouldn't be writing this damn poem now, so who had the better situation? Rest in soft peace, and ask, say, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry. That, I don't know why, that just sounds disingenuous to me. It doesn't sound honest. His best piece of poetry. So, your first daughter wasn't? For whose sake henceforth all his vows be such as what he loves may never like too much. What? Obscure grammar, last sentence allows for various like may carry the sense of please. Oh, okay. I don't know. He just doesn't. He sounds. Probably it's just a father's bias. I can't get on board with him saying, it's much better that they died young. Bull crap. I'd be saying a different word if I thought it was okay to say on video. Bull crap. Especially after having just had another baby. Okay, to John Donne. Donne, the delight of Phoebus, who is Apollo. What? God of poetry? Phoebus is the god of poetry? I thought he was the god of...
Isn't Phoebus another word for Apollo?
Yes. So I don't know. I've never thought of god of...
He's like the god of music,
Music,
medicine, poetry.
But I thought Dionysus was the god of poetry and
Dionysus.
wine. Wine and poetry, I thought. Wine and
parties.
and madness. But still, I thought that anytime there was like a...
It's just usually they mention Dionysus in poetry because he's like the fun god.
Maybe they're saying Phoebus because, there was the whole story of Hermes and he saw a turtle and killed it and scooped it out. And then he turned it into a instrument and gave that to Apollo. And he was so enamored with it. He's like, I love how I can make music with this. And maybe when you make music, you don't just make music, like we do these days where a guy sits in his room and plays guitar and has the girls listen. You sing too. So you have to present the poetry. And so maybe it was always assumed that you say things while you play, and so Phoebus is then the god of poetry.
I don't know. Apollo's always been specified as the god of poetry.
Has anybody been caught before by a guy who's playing guitar at you?
It's the worst.
Does that ever happen?
Yeah.
Where you sit down and then they just start playing, and then you feel like you're supposed to listen?
Yeah, you feel like you're inclined.
Like you're a jerk if you walk away.
Yeah,
Happened to my wife once. She told me about it. She was like, it's the most awkward thing.
Yeah.
And then her friend who was there with her too was like, I gotta go, and she leaves, and so it's just her. listening to this guitar she doesn't like.
Oh, it's also the worst when they're like they have their hats out for like change.
No. It's that's in public. You can walk away.
No, it was at a restaurant and he just like stayed in this one room and he's like, so I'm here to perform music. No one was paying him.
Oh yeah, I don't like to go to a restaurant where somebody's like playing and wants me to pay them. I was like, I'll pay you to stop because I just came here to eat, not to listen to somebody play music I don't like. Weird. Done. The delight of Phoebus and each muse. Who to thy one all other brains refuse. What the heck does that mean?
Me and not all of this poetry.
The muses shower their favors exclusively on you. Oh, to thy one all other brains refuse. Okay, so done, you got most of the poetic gifts. Whose every work of thy most early wit came forth example, and remains so yet. Longer a knowing than most wits do live, in which no affection praise enough can give. I could not praise you enough. To it thy language letters are its best life, which might with half mankind maintain a strife. All which I meant to praise. Oh, this pisses me off. I feel like Shakespeare does this so much better. All which I meant to praise, and yet I would, but leave, because I cannot as I should. So dramatic to me. Like, I feel like Shakespeare does it so much better and so much more confidently. And this guy's like, I don't know, I feel like this guy's a hack. Until we go to inviting a friend for supper. I really like this one. I feel like it's Ben Jonson being honest about who he is. Many of you wrote that it's about a party. It's true. Dinner party, yes. But there's more going on here. And there's something that makes me especially like it, and I will tell you what that is. So he's trying to get somebody, and I think it's a friend that lots of people would like there. You know, like the person that you want to come to your party because otherwise nobody's going to care. I mean, I don't know if that's still a thing or if everybody's kind of more cool about that these days. They're like, okay, well, we can hang out even if the cool person wasn't here. I don't know how that works. Or if there is no, like, cool people now, if everybody's just cool with everybody. That's what my daughter claims, but I think it's bullcrap. As they say, not everybody can be popular. That's not how that works. Somebody's mean and popular and doesn't do things. Let's see. Here we go. Let's listen to this invitation to this party. Tonight, grave sir, both my poor house and I do equally desire your company. Not that we think us worthy such a guest, but that your worth will dignify our feast with those that come. So if we get you to come, we can get more people to come, because you're awesome. Whose grace may make that seem something, which else could hope for no esteem. It is the fair acceptance, sir, creates the entertainment perfect, not the case. So he's like, you accepting the invitation to my party will make the party, not the food. Yet you shall have, to rectify your palate, an olive, capers, or some better salad, ushering the mutton, with a short-legged hen if we can get her. If we can get her. Not 100% sure we can get her. A hen full of eggs, and then lemons and wine for sauce. To these a coney, a small rabbit, is not to be despaired of for our money. Coney might not be a small rabbit, just a rabbit. And though fowl now be scarce, yet there are clerks, the sky not falling. Think we may have larks. Oh, might eat some larks too. All kinds of birds here. Now here's the part that I think makes this so amazing to me. This is the next line. He says, I'll tell you of more and lie, so you will come. Which kind of throws out of confidence everything he's said so far. He's like, yeah, we'll have lemon and wine. And some guy says he thinks he can get a lark, but really, can he? Probably not. So he says, I'll lie to you if I have to tell you what we're going to have. And he says, we're going to have partridge, pheasant, woodcock, of which some may yet be there, and God wit if we can. Not rail and rough too. These are different little types of birds that I guess have different tastes and goodness. I don't know what. I've never had any of those. Howsoever, my man shall read a piece of Virgil, Tacitus, Livy, or of some better book to us, of which we'll speak our minds amidst our meat. So somebody will be reciting, I guess, poetry there, which at the time I think that was something maybe people liked.
A bard.
Here, not so. I guess it'd be like the equivalent of having
Music playing?
Yeah, music playing, like maybe a band.
Yeah.
I can't really often get a band to a party. They just make it feels better.
Yeah.
Maybe you've got live music. It's like you were able to get somebody with guitars and speakers to come and play things live at your little party, which generally speaking will attract people from at least next door. Hopefully. They'll look over the fence. And I'll profess no verses to repeat. To this, if aught appear which I know not of, that will be the pastry, not my paper, show of. What? What do you say? Paper-lined pans were used to keep pies from sticking, and the writing sometimes rubbed off on the pie crust. Sometimes you eat ink. That's funny. So he says, I won't read any of my poetry. Don't worry. That's not going to happen. Digestive cheese and fruit there sure will be, but that which most doth take my muse and me is a pure cup of rich cannery wine, which is the mermaid's now, but shall be mine, of which had Horace or Anacreon tasted, their lives as do their lines till now had lasted. So he's saying, like, we're going to have wine there that's so good, it's like mythologically good. And if certain people in mythology had tasted of the wine, they would still be alive today because it's so good. Of course, none of this matters because he's not even being truthful. He's promising things that aren't going to happen. Their lives as, tobacco, nectar, the Thespian spring are all but Luther's beer, to this I sing. Of this we will sup free, but moderately, and we will have no pulley or parrot by, like a spare nothing. Government spies, okay, so we don't have to worry about spies, coming to our, I guess that's the thing. Nor shall our cups make any guilty men, but at our parting we will be as when we innocently met. This is the funniest part to me, is he says, our cups won't make any guilty men, so we'll drink heavily. I don't know that person. We will drink heavily of this wonderful wine that is like mythologically good, but none of us will get so drunk that we'll be embarrassed of what we've done the next day. You can't promise that, but he's promising that. He's like, we're going to get like good drunk, not bad drunk. How can you promise such a thing? He's like, it's not possible is what he's saying, that we're going to, like, nobody's going to feel guilty about anything they've done, and at our parting will be as when we innocently met. No simple word that shall be uttered at our mirthful board shall make us sad next morning. Nobody's going to get pissed off at each other or yell at each other, or affright that liberty which we'll enjoy tonight. So, yeah, he's promising things he can't possibly deliver on.
He just really wants him to come home.
He just really wants him to come over. So he's lying about everything. He's like, I'll give you the best wine that's ever existed. Maybe the guy's, if he missed that one line, he's going, oh, this sounds great. And then later he comes and he says, no, I said I would get this stuff. I didn't say you're going to get it. Nobody could get all that stuff. All those birds. Like, who's going to go kill those things? So that's the one thing I like about Ben Jonson. Let's go over to John Donne, whom I like better. John Donne's a weird case. Did anybody get the sense when you were reading the poems that he was ever a preacher? I mean, you probably did once you got to Meditation 17. You're like, oh, it's a sermon, random sermon, and Holy Sonnet 10 about death, and God's going to, help us overcome death, so why worry about it? But, like, when you're reading Flea and Elegy 19 and Sun Rising, you don't get this whole, like, preacher vibe. I didn't. But he was a preacher, and it's a weird situation because apparently he was so smart and so learned and so well written that his family had a Catholic background. This is around the time when the Church of England broke from the Catholic Church. So Catholics were not, I don't think they were quite hunted down, but it was like an imprisonable offense to remain a Catholic. So he came from a well-regarded Catholic family, and so he had to essentially like become Anglican in order to, Anglican being the adjective form of England, Anglican in order to kind of pass. And then I think he worked as a preacher for one of the kings, King James, I think, yeah, which I believe is the King James that the Bible came from, if I'm not mistaken. So Donne ended up doing that. He ended up working as a preacher, and then also, I guess on the side, he's writing these secret poems. Because I don't think he could publish those in his lifetime. Can you imagine like your preacher publishing like a really good, really funny sex poem? I just can't imagine. And then like getting to keep their job. I just can't see that being the case. And this is the 1600s, so probably not. Interesting when you think that him and Shakespeare were alive at the same time, I believe. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong year. Give me a second. Yeah, they're alive at the same time. Shakespeare was 1564 to 1616, and John Donne was 1572 to 1631. So he's having to preach to the Church of England, and everybody knows, I guess, his family came from a strong Catholic background, so he's having to like really lay it on thick, I guess, and make it sound like he's pro Church of England. I don't know if he ever really wasn't. But I know he was probably, it's one of the reasons he resisted becoming a preacher for so long. He didn't want to be. He was trying not to, but finally King James pressed it upon him so much, he was like, okay, I'll do it. Kind of made it sound like he could not do it. So let's talk first. In fact, I guess we'll leave that for the preachery part later. Is my Pokemon on? No. It's very hot. Maybe it's just I'm hot. Because of the sickness. No. Let's see. Let's do the flea first, because that's the one most people talked about. It's so weird. And I want to be clear, too, that we're not talking... a lot of people got this, a lot of people didn't. Not talking like a girl that he is literally married to. Or that he's even, I don't think, proposing marriage to. He's not saying, I would like to be married to you. He's talking about married in the sense that, like, somebody ever worked at I don't think they even have these anymore. Somebody, diners? You ever worked at a diner? Diners. Like, it's like the 50s. I worked at a restaurant once. It wasn't a diner, but it basically fulfilled the definition. But I don't know if this is strictly speaking legal, but there were these ketchup bottles, and they were glass, and, like, one would be, like, almost empty. Or, like, at the end of the day, some of them would be, like, almost empty. And so what you do is you do what was called like marrying the bottles. It was just a metaphor you had where essentially you pour the little ketchups into the fullest ketchup, and then now you got a full ketchup. But I don't know that ever really, like, if that's actually legal, because you got all this old ketchup. There's got to be little bits of ketchup from like 5 years ago in there, right? Like unless periodically they're completely dumped out and rewashed, and then you do it again.
Like shake them around a little bit. I don't know.
No, I don't think that's going to get rid of the oldest. Shake, done, brand new. So he's talking marrying in the sense that, like, coming together, I think, is more what he's talking about here when he uses the word marriage. But let's talk about the flea. And strangely enough, and a lot of you, it's kind of, not a lot of people mentioned like how weird it is about the insect thing. I don't know if you were reading the Norton notes in the bottom, but it does say down here at the end. Oh, good. Let's actually read this note about his love poems. It says, Donne's love poems are written over nearly 2 decades, beginning around 1595, and they were not published in Donne's lifetime, but circulated widely in manuscript. The title Songs and Sonnets was supplied in the second edition, which grouped the poems by kind, but neither this arrangement nor the more haphazard organization. The first edition is Donne's own. In Donne's time, the term sonnet often meant simply love lyric, and in fact, there is only one formal sonnet in his collection. So his aren't quite like Shakespeare's sonnets, where they're all 14 lines, where they have the 8 that propose the argument, and the next 4 are like the turn of the argument, and then the last 2 are like the conclusion. So his aren't quite like that. And it says, for the poems we follow the 1635 edition, beginning with the extremely popular poem, The Flea. And it says here that the insect, the flea, afforded a popular erotic theme for poets all over Europe, deriving from a pseudo-Ovidian medieval poem in which a lover envies the flea for the liberties it takes with his mistress's body. Okay. Gross. Like that, I envy that flea because it's everywhere. When we think of fleas, it's like gross, I think. You know, when you find out your dog's got fleas, you're like, go get the flea medicine now. I don't want to be bitten by a flea. I'm talking about inside dogs. Oh my gosh, one time I crawled into like outside dogs, like fenced in areas, like little bed, and I got fleas all over me, and they bit, and they hurt so bad. Like when they're all biting at once. You get one flea bite, it's like, it's not so bad. But then if it's like, I was like rolling. But the idea that a flea bites and then takes some blood into it, and if it bites me, if it bites you, it's got both of our blood inside, that was kind of like the love poem idea. And a lot of people would write this poem in different European languages, so he was but one person who wrote this flea idea. So it's not even his original idea. This is a thing that lots had happened all over the place. And he says, mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. Me it sucked first, now sucks thee. And in this flea are two bloods mingled be. So like he bites me, he bites you, then inside of him he's got a little bit of blood in there, it's just mingled. Mingled blood. It's us in there. It says, thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. It's like you didn't lose your virginity from this, did you? Did you?
Yes, did you?
And he says, it's not a sin, not a shame that you got bit. Oh my gosh, you're bit and you lost your blood. Now it's mixed with my blood inside of a flea. Are you sinning now? No. Just got bit by a flea. But our blood's in there mixed together. Said that yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. So it's pampered swells. I think of that more like a tick than I do a flea. And even then it's like, even though it's like nice language, like pampered swells. Like it sounds nice, but it's horrible. It's like a bug swollen with blood. And this, alas, is more than we would do. He's like, we're not going to mingle our blood together.
Ew, that's a blood oath.
It's like we're not going to have like my blood and you or your blood and me. And I think maybe the implication is some people were saying this in their posts. He's not like talking about we're going to make an infant. You know, that's the true like nature of like my blood, your blood becomes blood, little baby. He says we're not going to do that. Like that's not what's going to happen here. So this flea's already done worse than what we're going to do. Okay. He says, oh stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare. Where we almost, nay, more than married are. Like, I mean, literally, if we got married, like, that's not gonna, like, we're not gonna be like, okay, now you and me, we merge and become, like, one person, like Dragon Ball Z. Like, what is that thing where there's, like, a fusion? Is that what it's called? Or, like, do fusion where they become, like, one person together for a short time, and they're, like, a super-powered individual of, like, Go-Tanks.
Ever again, if you're gonna think they aren't.
So it's not talking about that. A combination of 2 individuals into one, not even. It's saying this flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. So it's like we exist, our marriage bed, our marriage temple, being like, you know, he's not talking about getting married, he's talking about consummating. Not quite going as far as get like, yeah, coitus. In a bed. And when he says our temple, I think of like a really nice bed with like the posts and like the net. That just might be me. Bless you. Though parents grudge and you, it says though parents grudge and you, so like nobody really wants this to happen, it's funny. We are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Cloister meaning as in a convent or monastery. And I like what he calls, last time we had, was it Shakespeare's sonnets? He liked to use the word sable to mean black.
Yeah.
Donne uses jet.
Oh, yeah.
He says it's jet black. I don't know why either one of those words implies black, but it does. He says, though use make you apt to kill me, meaning habit, let not to that. Self-murder added be and sacrilege 3 sins and killing 3. So he's like, I know usually you would kill a flea, right? Like, flea. Kind of think of us as mosquitoes. You know, we don't a lot. When you get bit by a mosquito, you're like, holy, got it. And then sometimes you get lucky and you've just got like a bunch of gray smudge on you. But then if you weren't paying attention, it becomes like gray smudge and blood. And you're like, it's like gross. He's like, so don't make habit of wanting to kill these things. Make you kill me. Because if my blood's in there, you're killing me. If your blood's in there, that's self-murder. You're in suicide. And he says, and then not kill him too, the little flea. That's 3 sins. You just killed 3 people. You killed me, you killed you, you killed him.
I'm not going to kill another mosquito.
Don't kill. Don't be a killer.
Never kill a mosquito.
And then she does. It's so funny. A lot of people talked about, I love how she resisted him. Literally, she says nothing this entire poem. You'll notice that, right?
Yeah.
Like she says not one word. We only know her actions by his responses to it.
Reject.
But she seems like, almost like, she makes him almost seem badass. You know, like she seems, like she's really standing up to him. She's holding her ground. But it's just, we only know that from his responses. And he's like, cruel and sudden. Hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? And he's talking about purpled nail. Like, has anybody killed a flea before, legit?
Yeah.
When you get it, the only way you can really kill them, you can't squeeze them like you can some bugs. They're so hard. You have to get them like between your nails, and there's like a little pop.
Oh, yeah.
And then you look, and you've got a tiny little blood streak on like your nail because the popping causes it to shoot on your nail. And so he's saying, purpled thy nail. So he's talking about, purple is like, at the time, it was like a difficult color to get. Only the richest could get it, because I think the only way to get purple was like these certain shells that were off the coast. And you had to grind them up and make purple. It was a very expensive process. So purple was a very royal color, very rich color to them. So, I mean, when talking about blood being purple, we don't often see purple blood. I mean, it's not really, we don't see it purple. But to say it's purple gives it that richness, that rich, full of life kind of color. So really, it's probably redded thy nail, but purpled is what he's using here to imply this is horrible. You killed so much life with your fingernail. And like she sounds like a badass. We haven't seen her do anything. We just hear like what she's done. Cruel and sudden. Yeah, get it, girl. Kill that flea. Wherein could this flea guilty be except in that drop which it sucked from thee? It only got like one tiny little drop of blood from you. That's what you're killing it for? Yet thou triumphs and say that thou find not thyself nor me the weaker now. Now, you don't actually see her say that. It's like he says that she's saying that and implying that that's what she's thinking. He's like, so do you feel weaker after being bitten? She's like, no. I just won. I feel great. And he's like, do I feel weaker? No. He says, so, 'tis true, then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor when thou yieldst to me will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. It's like your blood, my blood mixed in there. We didn't even notice that, right? There's no sin there. He's like, and then flea dies. Did you feel it? No, I didn't feel it. Literally, there was more blood transfer in that flea than there's going to be between you and me. So come on. I mean, what does it really do? Isn't it interesting? Like, if you think about this poem, like what it's talking about, think about what sex is to people. It's the most interesting thing. Sex it's a physical act, and it's meant for procreation. I think mostly now it's more of it's also got over time we've given it kind of a pleasure context. And really, I mean, that's been there since the Bible. If somebody wants to have sex, but even before that, like sex is got its other things besides just procreation. Animals, they merely do it for procreation for the most part. I think they found that dolphins do it for fun, don't they? But usually it's meant for procreation. So we've put a lot of extra meaning on sex than is really there, which is interesting if you think about it. If you talk about, let's just say, that two individuals having sex, like what we feel about that can change depending on the individual and depending on the situation. A lot of people feel like it's crazy that sex, the exact same sex, okay, like the same activity, in one instance can make people extremely happy and produce babies. And then that's joy, right? I have a baby. She's amazing. I love her. She's so cute. And it all came from, And in another context, sex can be rape. And we consider that to be like one of the worst things that a human can do to another, right? Like, so sex you want, good. Sex you don't want, bad. To the point that somebody can be the most horrible person we can think in our heads as a result. Like, depending on who it's had with, it can change its complete meaning. So he's talking about it here being purely a physical act. He's like, literally, if we literally have sex, that's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt me. It's going to be fine. It's just, it happens. He's thinking of it more like just this physical act between animals. But she is rightly so ascribing the human meaning to sex that humans have been doing for a very, very long time. A lot of mythology was even centered around the wrong kinds of sex. Like a lot of drama was derived in Oedipus that we read in the spring. I don't know if everybody's read Oedipus, but it's that Oedipus had sex with his mother, even though he didn't know, that caused a lot of drama of that. And it's because, in one idea, like before he knew the prophecy was true, he's like, yeah, I've had a wife and we've had children together and it's wonderful. And then finds out that was his mom and it changes everything, So it's like just having sex with like the wrong end. Sex is a human meaning ascribed thing. And it's interesting because it's like the thing that we do to create more people. Isn't that weird? It's got to be done, but like if it's done in the wrong context, we get very emotionally tied to it in different ways. I find it very interesting. Let's see. So next I want to do sunrising, which I always read in a certain way, and I'll probably still read that now. I always imagine like a Keanu Reeves surfer voice.
Oh my god.
Kind of pot smokerish, doesn't want to wake up kind of thing. Is usually what happens when I read this.
I gotta get the failure on.
So it's just a guy, the sun comes up, he doesn't like it. He's there with his lover in the bed. He's kind of upset that the sun woke him up. I kind of felt that way this morning when I wasn't feeling great. It was like my alarm was set for 7. I know, y'all are probably, I shouldn't say that's kind of mean. Y'all have to be here at like, 8 for your biology class? Here we go, sunrising. Busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us? Must to thy motions lovers' seasons run? Ugh, saucy pedantic wretch, go chide late schoolboys and sour prentices. Go tell court huntsmen that the king will ride. Call country ants to harvest offices. Love all alike no season knows, nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time. It's like, so go away. That's essentially what he's saying there. Son, go away. Why do you call on me and my lover here? Why do you have to love? Why do you have to move to the motions of lovers? Just like be different for lovers. If like we want to be in the bed and we want to be in here, just don't rise for us. Rise for other people who need you. Like, which is interesting because like y'all are the late. Like if y'all weren't at school on time, y'all would be the late school boys. Isn't that funny? So he's like, it's exactly who he's talking to. If y'all are like, oh, I don't want to wake up for school, so he's talking to. Not up on time. Well, go to school.
It was like a fever voice.
Court huntsman, it's time to ride. The king wants to ride. Ants, time to wake up, So he's like, but love knows no season or hours or days. Love just is and exists on its own time. It doesn't need to be woken up. Go away. Thy beams, so reverend and strong, why shouldst thou think I could eclipse and cloud them with a wink? But that I would not lose her sight so long. I always forget how cheesy this is. If her eyes have not blinded thine, look, and tomorrow late, tell me whether both the Indias of spice and mine be where thou left'st them, or lie here with me. Ask for those kings whom thou sawest yesterday, and thou shalt hear, all here in one bed lay. This is so cheesy. This is like so. Well, first he's pissed off at the sun, and he says, why do you even come here? I could eclipse and cloud your beams with a wink. Like I could go, you're gone. You're nothing to me. Look at my eyes are closed. I can't see you. You're not there. So silly. And then he says, but I wouldn't actually close my eyes because if I did, I would lose sight of my lover here too long. See? Like he's like, if I close my eyes and I can't see her, so it's not worth it. But if it's dark, it's... and he says, if her eyes have not blinded you, look into her eyes, son. Oh, her beauty is too great, says the sun. So he says, look, and tomorrow late, tell me whether both the Indias of spice and mine, talking about the West Indies and India, I believe. Oh, no, India is the East Indies. Yeah, and the gold is the West Indies. So you've got like the West Indies and you got the East Indies. And he's like, go, son, look and tell me if when you go check if they're still there. They're like, he's like, oh my gosh, they're gone. India's gone. West India's gone. The West Indies are gone. The East Indies are... What? Where are they? They're in bed with me. It's in her eyes. It's ridiculous. And he says, ask for the kings whom you saw yesterday, and you shall hear all here in one bed lay. It's like, she is those nations, I am the king, and we're all here. The whole world is here in this one bed.
Okay.
That's why I love to read this with this weird voice. And he's like, what does that even mean, all the kings? So he clarifies the next part. He says, she is all states, like nations, and all princes I. Nothing else is. God, talk about high school love, right? Nothing else is. Princes do but play us compared to this. All honors mimic, all wealth alchemy. Thou, son, art half as happy as we, in that the world's contracted thus. Thine age asks ease. And since thy duties be to warm the world, that's done in warming us. We are the world. Shine here to us, and thou art everywhere. This bed thy center is, these walls thy sphere. Oh my gosh. He's like, she's all states, so she's all nations, I'm all princes, so I am the prince of all her nations. Or I'm all the princes of all her nations. Nothing else is. This is high school love, if I've ever heard of it. Like, if anybody's like right now and you feel like, I'm in love. It's possible that you'll end up becoming like, especially like you'll want to make it work for a while if your parents were high school sweethearts. They may have parents like you met in high school and they're still together. There's that pressure you feel like I need to make that also happen because it worked for them. But you don't have to bow to that pressure. It's just a thing that's for some people it works, for some people it doesn't. Like my mom, her mom and dad got divorced right when she graduated high school. Isn't that nice? She'd already met my father and they were high school sweethearts. They got married. They're still together. And then I had more of a situation, I guess, like her parents. Except I was divorced way before my kid got to 18. It was like a year and a half, 2.5 years. It was 2006, so October 2006, that'd be like 2.5 years old, I guess. No, a year and a half. 2004, 2005, 2006, March 1. No. Oh, wait, that was when it was finalized. Yeah. October 2005.
So your child was 2.5?
1.5. And then the finalization, huh?
Like, she didn't really experience it.
Nah, not really. She just knows what it's like now. So it wasn't really quite like when my mom watched her mom and dad get divorced, like right around the time when she was getting married. I want to get married. We're getting divorced. We stayed together for the kids, but like
That's terrible.
so sometimes that's not the best idea, but we'll see. I don't know what I mean by we'll see, but anyways. So nothing else is. So keep in mind, and I know this is terrible to say to people of your age. I mean, this even applies to, 22? And Vance, 18? Oh, okay, yeah, perfect. So everybody, if you feel like this time in your life is really important, and later you'll remember not much of it. You may end up married to your high school sweetheart. Who knows? More likely you won't talk to anybody from your high school. I don't know. I've noticed that tends to happen more like... There are some people who do. Like, if you had a really good high school experience, I guess you might. But, I mean, still, most people that go to their own school and they go off somewhere. And, but this does remind me, like, you know, like everybody I knew in, like, high school who, like, they got kicked out of their house for, like, their boyfriend or something like that, or their girlfriend. Like, you can't date. No, Mom, you don't understand. We're in love. Like later, they ended up going, God, that person was awful. I should have listened. So it's a very common. And then later, you're like, what was I thinking? But like, it's weird that love always feels completely real at the time, doesn't it? Like it feels like this is the only thing in the world that exists. And then later you go, oh, there was more and better. And so, like, it's totally real to me right now. I always think of, like, this is like high school love. Nothing else is in this world except us in this bed. And he's like, the sun, this sounds like all people who have, like, a myopic view of the world, of any kind, really. Where he says, the sun is fulfilling its duty by shining here only on us, even though moments earlier he was saying, please go away. But he says, sun, you're doing your whole duty for the day and shining here right here on us because we are the whole world. And so you're doing everything you're supposed to do by shining on us in this one moment because we're the world and that's your duty is to shine on the world, and here we are. So it's like everybody, I think, has a little element of that to them. I mean, shoot, even I feel like I'm a fairly objective person, or try to be, and I feel like I've got this going as well. It's like it's very difficult to think from people's perspectives outside of your own. So it's the weirdest thing. Like I was listening to a podcast. Y'all know I do this a lot. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was saying that they presented ideas to these people who were self-identified as Democrats and Republicans, and or maybe it was conservatives and liberals. Regardless, it was one of those. And they presented people who were Republicans, Democrats, with different ideas that were politically motivated or like that had like a political bent to them. But they said, and they started popping out these new ideas that didn't really have a political affiliation yet or wasn't a real issue. And they said, this is a idea that's been proposed by the Democrats, blah, blah, blah. And then they would go, okay. They're like, so do you approve of that idea? Or like, are you on board with that? And they're like, not really. And they found out that whether or not people were okay with that particular idea depended purely on who they heard that the idea was associated with party-wise. So if they're like a Republican and they hear that the idea was an idea usually touted by Democrats, they were like, I don't really like it. And the Democrats did the exact same thing. If they heard it was an idea like, oh yeah, Republicans like this, they were like, I don't really think it's Democrat a thing. And so it's like people would just make a decision purely based on party affiliation because that's their party and that's where they see from. Like that's their perspective. When really like people should approach every idea individually and think, who all does this affect? How does it affect them? And this guy had written a book, and he was on this podcast saying that he really thinks that climate change, and really not necessarily climate change, but clean energy, is really more of a Republican idea, which I'd never heard before. And I was like, tell me this. And he says, because like right now you have like the solar field and green energy production is increasing, so that's more jobs. It talks about getting off the grid so there's less reliance on infrastructure. So like you could have your entire company exist on its own power grid that doesn't have to pay in or like get coal and get outside resources. So literally it's like a more independent type deal. So that's more of also a Republican idea. But like because Al Gore really pushed it hard in like his presidential election campaign, it's now become like isn't that the Al Gore thing? Like like climate change. And so nobody wants to like now it's a Republicans think this and a Democrats think this deal, when really it's more, if over time it's become more of a industry-wise, more of a Republican idea, the whole green energy thing, because it's creating more jobs and doing. Isn't that weird? And I thought it was an interesting theory that he had. But it's because we tend to lock into an idea and see ideas from our perspectives. This guy right here is like, we are the only lovers in the world. The sun shines on the whole world and shining on us. And we tend to think that our little world is the only world that matters, which is interesting. Did y'all like that one? I liked it. Of course, I like John Donne. Now, my favorite poem. Some people pointed out To His Coy Mistress was what it kind of felt like. I would agree. A lot of people pointed out that it's kind of inappropriate. Yeah, it is. But I'm hopefully going to show you that there is a point, that kind of an inviting a friend to supper moment in this poem that really makes the poem hilarious and not as bad as you think. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
No. Maybe?
Maybe?
Possibly. Here we go. So, and this is bad. I'm just going to warn you. We're going to read it, but it's bad. It's pretty bad. I think somebody said in their post that they read part of it to their mom when they started laughing. Did you see that? I was like, I don't know that I would like. I would be like, oh my gosh, okay. Like I can't imagine like doing that with like my mom. My mom was like Church of Christ, born and raised. I was like, Mom, listen to this, and she'd be like, okay, like pass it. So to his mistress going to bed. So she's going to bed, and this is his poem to her. Come, madam, come. All rest my powers defy. Until I labor, I in labor lie. And he hits the ground running here on inappropriateness. So it says here, labor in the dual sense of get to work sexually and distress. So, like if you're saying like somebody's in labor, like think about like women being in labor, they call it labor because it's laborious, it takes work. And he's like, until I labor, he means till I labor sexually. So till I've had, until I've worked sexually. I lie in labor is like I lie uncomfortable. So he's uncomfortable because he can't fulfill. How do I put this? He's already ready to go, but he's got no place he's allowed to go. Because he says in the next line, and this is how you can verify, he says, the foe oft times having the foe in sight is tired with standing, though he never fight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear. It's like, has anybody played sports before?
Yeah.
Have you ever had like a game like rained out, or like it's raining and they're like it might come back so we can play again later? Yeah, they'll postpone it for just like a few minutes because it's like a little sprinkle and there's no lightning, and so you have a guy like, and he was at bat, right? And like, you got the pitcher right there. Yeah, here we go. And it's like, oh, it's raining. Okay, we're going to call it for a minute, okay? And you just kind of stand on the side. You're like, and you keep like taking practice swings. And then like you've just been standing there. So now you're exhausted because you're waiting like 30 minutes. You finally get up there and you're just like, he's throwing slow. And you're like, but you got wore out just standing there because you didn't do anything. And that's what he's talking about. Although his foe is much smaller. And he gets tired with standing, though he never fight. And I think y'all pretty much figured out what that means.
Yeah.
So then he's saying, we need to go ahead and get through with this, or I'm going to get tired and I can't do it. This is his instructions here. Off with that girdle, like heaven's zone glistering, but a far fairer world encompassing. So he's like, take it off. Unpin that spangled breastplate which you wear, that the eyes of busy fools may be stopped there. So he's like, take off the breastplate which stops the eyes of busy fools. Like I've talked to a lot of people who just are a lot of girls that feel like when they go out in public that they're like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if this is. I've really wanted to do some sort of study. I wish somebody would do a study because I feel like girls that I've always known, my wife, daughter, like friends I've had, like when you're in public, it's like person staring at me or like won't stop staring, looking at me. There's a feeling that like you feel like you're being like watched from like the side or something like that, and you're like, just like keep your eyes to yourself. But it's like I would really love to do a study and like have somebody sit and watch and ask the women how they feel afterwards after walking through an area, and then there's somebody else who's been watching or like a computer's been watching where people's eyes are pointed. And see if that was really the case. Like if they actually were being stared at, if it was just an assumption that was being made. Because it's like a side eye thing. Nobody like I haven't known like a girl that looks like looks and says, nah, gotcha. I don't know, but this is what he's talking about here. The eyes of busy fools can be stopped because of your breastplate, so it's covering everything. Unlace yourself. For that harmonious chime, he's saying like the sound of a lace undoing, like that little tiny sound of like cloth on cloth is a harmonious chime. It's like that's what it sounds like. Tells me from you that now it is bedtime. I love how lightly he's tripping on those words. Do y'all hear that? It's almost like the clock lines from Shakespeare when he was like, when I do hear the clock that when I do count the clock that tells the time, and it sounds like a clock ticking. This is like lightly tripping on a bed, I think, like stepping on a bed, where he says, "Tells me from you that now it is bedtime." It's just ta 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 ta. Here we go. I don't know. He sounds excited. He says, "Off with that happy busk, which I envy, that still can be and still can stand so nigh." He says he's making another joke going back to like his little faux, where he says, "Off with the happy busk." You know, like there's like the things the women used to wear. I guess it was like it's. I've only seen this in like movies that were like medieval times, like Shakespearean times, but it was like a. I don't know if this is what he's calling a busk or not, but I'm assuming it's something like it, where it's something that's in a rigid state and it stays that way. Where like once you take it off, it's not like clothes where you take a shirt off and it's like a wad and you throw it on the floor. Like you take this off and it stays in that position.
It's like those things that they're worn as dresses.
Corset.
Corset.
Okay, so it has to be kind of like that. So like when you take it off, it's still that shape. So he's like, "Which I envy," and I thought he was going to say because it's so close to you. He says that still can be, or that always can be, and still can stand so nigh. I think this guy really would have liked Viagra. Because he's like, because it can just stand like that forever, implying that he can't. So come on. This is legit. Like this is not like I'm not making this up. It's all right here. So it's not like I'm giving like some crazy interpretation. And he says, "Your gown going off." Oh, the gown. We're at the gown now. "Such beauteous state reveals, as when from flowery meads the hill's shadow steals." Now, this is an amazing image. It was very hard for me to figure out, and I literally had to almost draw it. I think I might draw it here. No, it's just a flower in a meadow.
Are you sure?
Like Nichols, we should not do that at all. So, and I hope this pops up on the video. So let's say like we have a hill, right? So here we have a hill. Down to below we have a flowery meadow. So here we have the little meadow and it's pretty and there's flowers. Okay, so the sun is in the sky here. And as the sun goes down,
Got it, yeah.
the shadow comes like that. And so you can't see the flowers until the sun comes here. Then finally the hill is not stealing shadow from the flowers. You can see them. They're pretty. They look exactly the way they should. Now he says, "Your gown going off, such beauteous state reveals, as when from flowery meads thy hill's shadows steal." So it's like all of what she's been wearing is like the shadow. But now as she takes it off, because if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like any clothing that people wear, I mean, it is, but he's saying like what it does is it's not fully like wearing like a square box, you know, around you at all times where nobody knows your size, your shape, anything like that. Clothing is for the most part form-fitting. And so he's saying it's kind of like a shadow where you can kind of make out the flowers in the shadow, but you don't really see it until the sun is like shining there. Like, ah, there it is. And so that's what I think he's saying there is like once the gown goes off, boom, everything's clear. Now here's where this is bad. "Off with that wiry coronet and show the hairy diadem which on you doth grow." I can't remember what diadem is. I gotta look it up. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Diadem. A diadem is a crown that is worn especially by a king or queen as a symbol of royalty. So he's talking about, let's see, the hairy crown on, like there's not going to be something, is a coronet, what's a coronet?
It's a coronet is also a like tiara or like a crown. Girl, I know what I said. You heard me.
Let me get rid of this ad. Golly. And a coronet is a small crown. So I don't know if he's saying...
I think we all know what he's
Saying.
See, it's like you think that he's talking about...
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was a wiry... If it's a wiry coronet... Okay, so here's the thing. Is like you could interpret this one of two ways. One... she could be wearing like a tiara type deal on her head that's kind of like got her hair pinned up in it. Yeah. And then so when she takes that off,
Then her hair comes down.
Then her hair comes down, and he sees like the fullness of her hair.
That's like boring.
It could also be, and I think when y'all were talking about what was it, corset? That could be. You probably got to have wires to support it.
Yeah.
So that could be the crown of like her lower section, and so then that reveals a crown over something else.
Some of them are like leotards. So like, do you know what I'm saying? Like some, they're like buckle. That makes sense. Like
Sure. I don't know if they had them that complicated, or actually I think it was mostly laces and having to tie things in different places. I don't even know if they had like one single, like if they'd even be able to figure out something as complicated as like a bra back then with like the straps and the hooks. Like I don't know if they could create something quite so complicated. So it might have just been a bunch of different pieces put on one after the other to achieve the same effects that we have now by one simple piece. But I don't know. So I don't know 100% sure what he's talking about here. But it seems weird that that would be the last thing she would do is what was on top of her head, to me. So he says, now off with those shoes, and then safely tread in this love's hallowed temple, this soft bed. So now the shoes, that's the last thing why would you end with your shoe? That's very weird. Usually shoes is the first thing, but whatever. In such white robes, heaven's angels used to be received by men. So he says, and it's like in such white robes. I think he's talking about the white robes. I really think he's talking about her naked, pale skin, I think. But he says like angels used to be received by men. I don't remember ever hearing that angels were received naked. Maybe he's just saying like similar white robes. Maybe he's saying that she's still wearing that last bit of robe. They like it. And he says, angel brings with thee a heaven like a Muhammad's paradise. Which is what? A place of sensual pleasure thought to be populated by seductive or is for the delectation of the faithful. Okay. So sexual paradise. And he says, and though ill spirits walk in white, we easily know by this. Gosh dang. And though ill spirits walk in white. So you think like ghosts. Oh, it's white, it's pale. Those kind of ghosts. We easily know by this these angels from an evil sprite. Those set our hairs, but these are flesh upright. Good Lord. So he said like the bad ghosts. Like, we can tell ghosts from beautiful angels. By the ghost, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel a chill in the air, and the hair stands up. And he's saying, you know what he's saying. The flesh is upright. There's only one. So then he goes to his new stanza, and I think that this is hilarious because the way he writes it almost to me implies like his feeling and his excitement. This is really funny. Listen to this. He says, license my roving hands and let them go before, behind, between, above, below. He's just putting locations one after the other, and you can almost like he's like he doesn't know what he's doing with himself because he's so excited. He's like he's just all over the place because he can't. Almost like you can imagine, like the guy has no idea like how to kiss because he's so excited about using his lips to kiss somebody. He's like, no idea what he's doing. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm frightened. And he says, this is great. Oh my America, my newfound lands, my kingdom. So he's like in discovering like you unclothed in the bed here, like it's like discovering America. Like new discovery, newfound land. My kingdom safeliest with one man manned. My mine of precious stones, my empery, how blessed I am in this discovering thee. To enter in these bonds is to be free. There where my hand is set, my seal shall be. And I was like, what does that mean? It says the jokes mingle law with sex. Where he has signed a document, placed his hand, he will now place his seal, and in the bonds of her arms he will find freedom. It's basically sex. And he says, kingdom safeliest and with one man man. So you think like kingdom in the traditional sense with like a king runs a kingdom. So he's like, I will be the king of your kingdom. How blessed I am in discovering thee. You're my mine of precious stones. You're my empire. Let's do this. And then right here, if it's not clear enough, it is now in line 33. Full nakedness. All joys are due to thee. As souls unbodied, bodies unclothed must be to taste whole joys. So he's like, souls unbodied, if we're clear and we bare our souls to one another and we're truthful and honest with each other, If our souls are unclothed, thus our bodies must also be. God, what a line, right? Like, whatever. Trying to get me out of my clothes. Okay, gems which you women use are like Atalanta's balls. And this is an interesting story, so I'm going to go down here and talk about this. So Atalanta was running a race against her suitor, Hippomenes. And she was beaten when he dropped golden apples for her to pick up. Donne reverses the story. So he's trying to win her hand in marriage. And in order to do that, he has to beat her in this race. And as he's running, he throws some golden apples. He's like, throws them out in front of himself. And she's like, ooh, gold. And like, she stops and like picks them up. And so he wins the race. So he like tricks her. And so he flips this around. He says, gems which you women use. So he's like, women wear jewelry. Says those are like Atalanta's balls, cast in men's views, that when a fool's eye lighteth on a gem, his earthly soul may covet theirs, not them. So it's kind of like the idea of like, oh, I don't want to get into too much detail here. It's like weird, but like, I guess I can do this simply. Like if a girl's wearing like lots of jewelry, like, you know, like some pretty jewelry, it's weird, but the guy would then desire the woman for the jewelry she's wearing, not at all the jewelry she's wearing. It's not like the girl's like wearing pretty jewelry that like accentuates things, and then the guy goes, ah, yes, let's go back to your place. Like, okay. And then like go back to her place, and she's like, take that necklace off. She's like, yeah. And he's like, thank you. And he goes, walks off with it. Like, he's like, you're like, oh, that's not what I was trying to achieve at all. I didn't want him to want my jewelry. So it's like, that's what it's saying. It's like men, they don't want the jewelry. They want what's behind the jewelry, ironically, despite the fact that the jewelry is what's bringing the attention. Isn't that weird? It's weird. It's a very complex idea he puts in a couple of lines. And he says, like pictures or like books' gay coverings made for laymen are all women thus arrayed. Themselves are mystic books, which only we, whom their imputed grace will dignify, must see revealed. Then, since that I may know, so he's like saying it's like a book covering, so like take the book covering off so that we may read the inside of the book. That's what he wants to do. He wants to read her full book. And he says, then, since that I may know, as liberally as to a midwife show thyself. You know what a midwife is? Midwife delivers babies.
Yeah.
So he's like, show to me as liberally as show to a midwife. Midwife sees everything.
Yes.
So he's like, I want to see everything. He says, cast all ye this white linen hence. Here is no penance, much less innocence. And this is hilarious. This is where the whole poem turns. Like, it sounds like this whole time he's describing her getting undressed, right? That's what you're like, okay, so she's getting undressed one piece at a time. They're naked in the bed together. Here they go. That's not what's happening. Like, it's weird, but like you read it that way, and it feels that way. But what's really happening is much more hilariously embarrassing for the guy. He ends with, to teach thee, I am naked first. Why then, what needst thou have more covering than a man? So he's been talking the whole time about how she needs to take her clothes off, and it sounded like he was explaining that she was. But if you really look closely, he's asking her to take her clothes off. Going piece by piece at a time, talking about each piece that she should be taking off.
And she's like,
she's taken off none of this.
She's just standing there like, bruh.
And then at the end of the poem, you think, okay, well, she's nude and things are about to happen. But no, he's been pleading with her to do it. And instead, at the end of the poem, rather than what you thought was happening is her taking her clothes off, she's still standing there fully clothed. And he's naked in the bed saying, please join me. It's like embarrassing, and she's just like, ugh. And like, I don't know, I assume she walks away. So it's very similar to the Flea poem, where originally it sounds like the Flea is the one where she's saying no, and the elegies where things get, bless you, a little busier. But that's not the case at all. In fact, this one's far more embarrassing, because like at the end of the poem, you have a naked guy sitting in front of a fully clothed girl pleading for her, like, please, come on. And she's just like you don't know what her response is. My assumption is it's not good. It's not like, yes, I will do exactly as you requested. Here we go. That just doesn't seem like that's what's... I just picture a fully clothed woman and a naked guy going, please. And it's just hilarious. Like, what kind of argument is that, too? Why needst thou have more covering than a man? He's like, look, you don't need to be more covered than I am, and I'm naked. It's like walking into a room and you just got a naked guy and you're like, good Lord, and you just walk out. It's kind of like, it's so funny to me. And so to his coy mistress, he's pleading with her, but you never get that sense of like the guy feels embarrassed. He seems kind of confident the whole time.
Yeah.
Where he's like, making all those arguments for why she should sleep with him. Here, he's making all those arguments, but at the end, he sounds ridiculous. And he was being much more graphic, but about things that weren't even happening. And then at the end, and he didn't even cover like how long it took for him to get his clothes off. I almost think like the movies, like the movies like the girl goes into the bathroom to get ready, and the guy's like his shirt and his shorts are off in like a second, almost like Bruce Almighty, where like he goes, and like all his clothes just shoot off, like through magic, and I don't know, it's just really, really funny to me. So let's move on to Holy Sonnet 10, which I'll go through fairly quickly because I'm not too fond of it. It's just like one of the holy sonnets I picked so I could have one. But Holy Sonnet 10, this is where he like totally switched gears. We go from like sexual things, trying to get girls, trying to talk about love, to religion completely. No more sex stuff. So, and I like this. I don't like Holy Sonnet 10 so much, but I like Meditation 17. It's definitely my favorite of all the stuff that we read by Jonson and Donne. And he says, death be not proud. And that's a phrase I think, have y'all heard that before?
Death be not proud.
You may not have heard it yet, but like death be not proud is it's a phrase in society and has been. You've heard it where?
In one of Shakespeare's sonnets, he said the same thing about, like, death shouldn't be proud, take it slow or whatever.
Oh, yeah, true. The concept was definitely there. I don't know if the exact words were, but I've heard those words before, even before I read this poem. He says, death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. So he's saying, like, don't be proud because you don't actually kill anybody. And it's like, what? I mean, death comes, people die. How did people not die? Right? What's he saying? From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be. Okay, so he's like, we have rest and sleep, which are like pictures of death. They're kind of like death. When you fall asleep, you don't really know what's going on. You're not, you can't see anything that's happening. So it's kind of like a picture of death. It's like a preview of death, right? Whenever you fall asleep every single night, that's like a death preview, right? Because one day you'll be dead, and it's kind of like sleep.
It's a death practice.
But he says, we get much pleasure from that. Like sleep is a picture of what it's going to be like when we're going to be dead. And every time you sleep, you're like, I feel well rested. I feel great. So he's like, it's going to be like you. He says, then from thee much more must flow. So we'll get even more pleasure from you because one day we'll die in our bodies here. We'll have a nice long rest. Then we'll go to a better place. Soon our best rest of their bones and souls delivery, which it says there means to find rest for their bones and freedom for their souls. And be like, once we'll fully die, we're dead. Then thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. Like you don't actually do anything. You wait on people to do things to each other. Or sickness. You don't actually make anything happen yourself. And dust with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swell'st thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death thou shalt die. So everybody will die at one point. It's like we're sleeping for a little bit, then we go to heaven. It's nice. Like we go from, like death is like, haha, I gotcha, you're dead. And it's like, yeah, thanks for that long nap, buddy. Now I'm going to heaven. And then once, at some point, everybody on earth has died and everybody's now in heaven. Well, now death is dead. Death does nothing. Your job's gone. Don't be proud, stupid. Your whole purpose is over. Judgment Day came. It's over. Your time is done. Oh, I didn't realize this was actually a reference to the Bible. So 1 Corinthians 15:26, it says, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. When Jesus comes back. So, what time we got? 11:57? I still have Dr. Pepper left. I really kind of want to go get another one, though, before we... Meditation 17. Let's go grab 5-minute break. And then we'll talk about Meditation 17 the rest of the time, and then I will tack stuff onto the end of the video for today. So let's see, 11:57, 11:58 for me. So let's say 12:03 by phone time. Y'all. Let's do our last thing, the Meditation 17, which is appropriate because we're really kind of switching gears here. It's not short, it's pretty long. It's, I guess you could say it's a lot more religious in nature, but even if you don't think about it in terms of its religion, I think it still works. Okay, so here we go. Talking about Meditation 17. It starts out with a quote which I believe is in Latin. And it says, "Now this bell tolling softly for another says to me, thou must die." It doesn't provide any kind of note, so I'm assuming that's what that means, but...
It references it later in the footnote.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Does it mean something different?
It's meaning the death toll bell. Like whenever someone dies, there's a ring for each year of their life or whatever.
Right. I was talking about like whether that Latin phrase that's there literally means what's right below it.
Yeah.
I think it is, but I don't know Latin, so it's difficult to know. So this is actually a sermon that he wrote down, and I don't know how many times or if he actually preached it out loud. By the way, I always hate the word preached. I just don't like it. I feel like we have teach and taught. Preach should technically be praught, but I can't change language and make that happen.
Start using it.
All the church camp people would be pissing the youth ministers off. They'd be like, "Yeah, what you brought the other day was amazing." What?
I beg your pardon?
I loved it. It was amazing. Now, I guess it's just because prot just sounds like a bad word of some kind. Yeah, it does. It sounds like an insult of some kind. I don't know why I said insult and not insult. Here we go. So it says, so the quote itself says, "Now this bell tolling softly for another says to me, thou must die." Which I guess was a quote that existed before. I think this is an important piece. Really, there's so much of what's in here has been used in literature since, not just literature, but has popped its way into poetry and films. But it really does underscore the importance of caring about others besides oneself, which I think is one of the biggest problems that we have in the world, is that we don't think enough about the needs and wants of others and how important everybody else is to us, and how we exist in the way we exist today because we are a society. Like, again, I was listening to a podcast the other day where the guy was talking about, think about how you make a decision about whether or not to see a movie. If you can trace back like the decision whether or not to see a movie, oftentimes you can trace it back to like maybe you weren't going to see it, but your friends saw it. Maybe even a friend whose opinion you don't necessarily respect. And like they said, "Oh man, it was so good." And you're like, "But really?" And once you hear from another individual that movie was so good, you're like, "Oh, now I kind of want to watch it." Even if you don't necessarily think that what they think is usually what you think, it's just you've heard something come out of somebody else's mouth, and that's now part of the social construct. And so we end up making so many decisions every day just based on what people think or what we think people will think. And oftentimes, sure you've heard before, like the whole the fart idea, like he who smelt it dealt it.
Yes.
Or like oftentimes if two people or somebody's done something wrong to you, it's whoever comes to you first is the one that you believe, just because you heard it first. It said he's going to come to you and like he did this to you and it's horrible. He's probably going to come and say that he didn't, and I'm just trying to say this, but it's whatever. And the person comes and says, "No, he just said that because he doesn't want me to like you. He said you'd say that." Well, yeah. Like, duh. Of course that person would say that. They don't. So a lot of us, we think socially, yet we don't always act socially. We think more from a selfish perspective. And we only think about what we want and what's good for us. And I think that that's a huge problem in society today. Is, have I ever mentioned this before? Like, I think that, like, kind of one of my mantras for, like, the biggest problems in the world is, like, what is the quote that I had that I came up with? It was, one of the biggest problems I think we have in the world today is that people are either unwilling or unable to see the world from other people's perspectives. We only think about how things affect us. And even, like, our logic, it's so weird how, like, we can argue around that point. We'll say, like, well, no, actually it'd be better for the vast majority of people if this happened. You'll say, no, because, like, for an example, like, have you ever heard of the idea of, I'm sure you've heard of it, like Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. And I know that I had this idea too back in the day, which was, I don't want people who are on drugs to be on Medicaid and food stamps. Like, as like a lot of people who are going to be on that is going to be like people who are on drugs and they just take drugs. They're getting free food from the government. And I don't like that idea. And I believed that for a very long time. So there was this one state that went ahead and passed that idea where you had to have a drug test in order to, because it's going to cost us a lot of tax money is one of the things that I was thinking. People who are on drugs and like using the food stamps when they really could be going out and getting a job and that kind of thing. And I didn't want to like subsidize that. So there was one state that actually did the drug test thing, and it was a southern state. There might have been others, but this is the only one I know about. And I don't know which one of the 4 states it was, but I think it was either Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, or Florida. I know it's one of those 4 southern coastal Gulf Coast states. And they put this into practice. So they started drug testing people who would apply for food stamps and Medicaid. And with no significant, no change in the number of people who applied, like it seemed like the amount per population were still applying, they started drug testing every single person who got on it. Cost the state many millions of dollars. And you know what percentage of people they caught testing negative on a drug test?
Not a big.
Very minimal.
It was 2 people.
Dang.
They caught 2 people. So it cost millions of dollars to catch those 2 people. Now, granted, I still don't want people who are on drugs and I always have thought, well, drug testing would be a good way to get around that. But then you think, wait a minute, if we do the drug testing, there are enough ways around it, or people just won't apply. It's one of those ideas that seems like a good idea, but when you think of how it'll actually work in practice, there are too many ways around it in order to actually make it effective. So I always thought that was a great idea because I thought I don't want people who are on drugs to have food stamps, which that's not going to solve that. That's still going to be a thing. So that idea that I once had, once I realized how it actually worked in practice, is something I should have always assumed all along, which is, think about, I'm not sure this is exactly the same thing, but think about one of the things that many Texans have been most critical about, even people who are, diehard Republicans and conservatives have been kind of critical of the whole wall idea. There's a lot of Texans who are going to lose some property, on the south border because there's a wall going to cut right through it. But think of it, if you make a wall that's instead of like a wall, it's like a bigger, taller wall. Just make bigger, taller catapults. The world will respond to new variables in its own way. Like, will the cost be worth what it does? Now, if you really had a way of it might be really expensive, but if you had a way of inserting trackers into everybody, and when they cross a border and stay there, they get in trouble, that would work. But that's kind of violating all kinds of freedoms. So if you think about how this thing will really work in practice, or how things will really affect other people, I think a lot of people are unwilling to both see the future and see how things will affect others. So that's what he's really talking about this whole time. Let's start here. Perchance he for whom this bell tolls may be so ill as that he knows not it tolls for him. So we have a guy, he's laying in bed sick, and a lot of time you'll have a bell that signals somebody's died, or signals a funeral's come or somebody's sick. So that's why they would have the bell toll. So you have the passing bell for the dying, it says, and you're like, wait, is this for me? So you might have a guy who's so sick he doesn't know that it's tolling for him, that he's the one that's dying. And perchance I may think myself so much better than I am, as that they who are about me and see my state may have caused it to toll for me, and I know not that. So he's like, maybe I think that I'm in a much better position than I am, and I think, oh, I'm fine, but really I'm sick, and I'm the one that it's tolling for, and I'm the one who's dying. So he's like, maybe he doesn't realize it's tolling for him who's dying, and I don't realize it's tolling for me who's dying. And he says, I think this is kind of risky, because the word Catholic, y'all know the word Catholic has a meaning.
Yes.
It means kind of like liberal, open, fair, I believe, something along those lines. Let me look it up just to be sure. It was a word before it was a church, I believe. It says including many different things, comprehensive and universal. So really the word Catholic Church is, I guess, supposed to mean almost like the universal church, because it encompasses everything. So Catholic. It says the church is Catholic, universal, and so he's really saying the same word twice. And it was very risky for him to say that, because this is like an Anglican sermon he would have preached. So he would have been talking to the Church of England saying the church is Catholic, which is very risky. And he says, so are all her actions. All that she does belongs to all. So everything that happens to one person happens to all. It says when she baptizes a child, so once a child is baptized in the church, that action concerns me. For that child is thereby connected to that head, which is my head too, and it grafted into that body whereof I am a member of the church. So when somebody's baptized, that concerns me, because they're part of the church now. I'm part of the church, so that concerns me. Like, y'all ever had somebody baptized in your church, like everybody goes down afterwards and they hug them and say, hey, congratulations, you're baptized. Or does it just kind of happen and nobody knows and everybody's like, get out of here. I hope that's not the case. Says that when she buries a man, so when the church, as somebody dies in like a funeral, and they have a funeral, that action concerns me as well. All mankind is of one author and is one volume. So it says like anybody who dies in the church, that person's part of the body of the church, and so that person's part of me. And so that concerns me as well. It says all mankind is of one author and one volume, God being the author and the volume being humanity. And when one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book. So it's not like, when somebody dies, you tear the chapter out of the book. Well, there goes Mr. Nichols' chapter. It's gone. Throw it out. Rather, he says it's translated into a better language. And every chapter must be so translated. So like once you all will eventually die, he's saying like in the book of life, you'll be translated into a better language, something that's, better to look at, easier to look at, nicer to look at. It says that every chapter must be, so God employs several translators. Some pieces are translated by age, some by sickness, some by war, some by justice. But God's hand is in every translation, and his hand shall bind up all our scattered leaves again for that library where every book shall lie open to one another. Which is an interesting way of thinking of heaven, right? It's like a whole bunch of book stands where all the books are open and all like the pages are available to be seen by everybody. It's like, hey, buddy, hey. It's like, oh, I see that you were killed in war. That's a pretty good thing that translated you. That's got to be an interesting story. Oh, yeah, I see you got sick. That must have been a trial. Let's hear your story. And so everybody's like very honest with each other and stuff. Man, it's like I actually fear like if everybody in heaven is like telepathic and can read each other's minds. So that sounds awful. I would just share what I want to and not they'd be like, oh, you did that? Oh my gosh. How'd you get here? One of my favorite images was there was a movie called, I think it was South Park the movie. I don't think it was the TV show. I don't actually like South Park, but for some reason I like the movie. And it was like they go to heaven at some point and it says like heaven population like 2,500. Which I thought was hilarious. Like there's billions of people that have ever lived, and it said population of heaven was like 2,500. That was hilarious. If you think about like all the things you have to do to like technically, I know there's like the whole grace thing, but you know what I'm saying. To follow all those rules. Let's see. As therefore the bell that rings to a sermon calls not upon the preacher only, but upon the congregation to come, so this bell calls us all. So it's like, once bing, bing, church is starting, you're like, okay, so just the preacher's supposed to show up, right? No, it's all of us. It's everybody shows up for wherever the bell rings. Does the school still have bells, or is it like a weird tone that plays like bing?
It's a weird tone. It's like,
I wish.
Why do they do that? Why not just like recreate the old bell sound? Like I don't understand. Like it was big, and loud.
PA systems have like tones built into them actually.
Sometimes when like the third minute when you're supposed to be there, it's like bing, bing.
But anyways, everybody knows that bell's not like, teachers, your time to be here. Students, who cares? Maybe students feel that way. So let's see. I'm so glad we don't have bells here. Stupid. Let's see. Says, but how much more me who am brought so near the door by this sickness? He says, there was a contention as far as a lawsuit in which piety, dignity, religion, estimation were mingled, as which of the religious orders should ring to prayers first in the morning. And it was determined that they should ring first that rose earliest. So it's like, for some reason there was a lawsuit regarding this, but it says like who should ring the bell for church in the morning. It says the people who rose the earliest, because it's not just like church that meets once a week. It's church that'll meet like every day. Like you can go to mass, morning mass. And he says, if we understand aright the dignity of this bell that tolls for our evening prayer, we would be glad to make it ours by rising early in that application, that it might be ours as well as whose indeed it is. So he's saying, yes, the bell is tolled for somebody specifically. However, we could also say, hey, that's also for me every time it tolls. The bell doth toll for him that thinks it doth. And though it intermit again, yet from that minute that occasion wrought upon him, he is united to God. So he's saying like every time that one person listens to the bell get tolled and thinks, that's for me. Whether it's a death, whether it's go to church, whether it's for some other reason, that person becomes united to God because they're participating in some like communication, which is weird. So listen to this part here. I think it's this part here that's the best. Let's see. Maybe. Let me see. It says, who casts up his eye to the sun when it rises? Which is interesting here because for whom the bell tolls and the sun also rises are both titles of Hemingway books, and I think that he got both of them from here. It says, but who takes off his eye from a comet when that breaks out? Who bends not his ear to any bell which upon any occasion rings? You hear a bell or a phone, you think, who's that? What's that? Is it for me? Right? I mean, you always think like somehow this applies to me in some way. When you hear an alarm go off, somebody's alarm go off in like class, you don't just not listen to it. You don't like not hear it. You hear it, and you think like, what's going on? But who can remove it from that bell which is passing a piece of himself out of this world? Is it weird to think that way? He's talking about specifically, I think, the death bell. When the death bell tolls, if you're part of like the body of human beings, and one person's just died, then every time that death bell rings, that's a piece of you leaving the world. If you think about it that way. It is deep, very deep. He says, no man is an island. So if you've heard that before, it comes from this. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. As well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. So I think that's a problem that we all have. And I don't think this necessarily from just a religious perspective, but we think if something doesn't affect somebody that we know specifically, it doesn't really concern us. We're very selfish people. So, like down, take the wall, for example. People's lands are getting cut in half, lands they've owned for centuries with their family, down to the southern border. And you're like, yeah, but they're really far away. They're Texans, but like that doesn't affect me specifically, so I don't have to think about it. And he's saying that that's not how you should think. You should say, not only if like somebody like we think like my dad like mows lawns for a living. That's what he's done for like last probably 20 years or so, something like that. And his whole mowing rig, all the trailers and his truck actually got stolen like 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. And so he had no truck, no trailer. But then I think one of his workers like borrows his truck on Saturday so he can go out and do stuff and he makes some extra money. And my dad lets him. And he had left his phone in the truck when it got stolen, so the cops were able to track the truck, and they were able to track the truck down. And when it was in Dallas, they drove it from like Greenville to Dallas. And then when they got to Dallas, the trailer was gone, but the truck was there. And the mowers were gone, all like his weed eaters and all that stuff that he has for like the business. So he's like, well, what do I do? And everybody like at the church kind of pitched in, and he was able to get like some mowers, and somebody gave him a trailer. And so that's common, I think, for churches oftentimes. If somebody in the church has a problem, help that person. Or somebody in my neighborhood has a problem, help that person. But if it's outside of the community, outside of outside of mind, like people don't want to help those people. It's somebody you don't see, you don't really want to help them. Like I can't imagine somebody would hear like, you know, somebody from like Chicago would hear about my dad's mowing trailer go missing, like, so, like, it's like, why would I donate to that? But then it's like somebody next door is like, oh, yes, yes, yes. But it's saying here, and I don't think this is necessarily a religious issue, but just like an issue for people in general, is if we think of every single person as significant to the entirety of everybody. Like, I've often wondered, like, you ever heard of mission trips?
Yeah.
Like, you know, churches sometimes go on mission trips, and I've thought, like, if on a mission trip, like, for some reason all the countries in the world said when you go on a mission trip you're not allowed to preach the message to the people that you're helping. You just can help them. You can give them food, you can build things for them, but you can't ever talk about God or Jesus. And you're obeying the law of the land, you know, as anybody should. Would people still go on mission trips?
Probably not.
Probably not. If it's not self-serving in some way, they don't want to do it anymore. It's like supposed to make you feel better. It's like, but why is it not okay to just help people? Like, why is that not worth it? And I feel like that still wouldn't happen, which is strange to me, that people wouldn't help people if it didn't satisfy some aspect of what they want to do, which is interesting. And I don't think that that's necessarily a religious issue. I think it's true of all people. We tend to vote with what affects us directly. I feel like when people are poor, they vote Democrat, and when they have money, they vote Republican. If your life situation changes, you're like, I have no money and I can't find a job. And my gosh, I feel like what it's like now to be poor. Like, I vote Democrat because I have no money and they're not giving me any money, and like all these rich people are rich. And but then if you're a Republican, you're like, you get money. You're like, oh, I've got money now. I want to hold on to that money. I don't want to pay taxes. So people tend to vote with where their pocketbooks are because they don't think about the others and how everybody else is affected. They're just like, how do I keep what's mine now, and how do I get more for myself? And I think that this is kind of talking against that. Let's see. And he says, any man's death diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It always tolls for thee. Anytime you hear that somebody's died, it tolls for you. Anytime something happens to anybody in the world, it affects you, whether or not you want to think so or not. So it's a big problem I've seen these days, too, with, and this might be just the nature of you being kids, but a lot of kids your age don't follow the news, don't like care about politics. You're like, that doesn't bother me, you know. But it should affect. You should all be thinking about that, because I mean, politics affects everybody, and like world news affects everybody. Like what's going on the other side of the world doesn't affect me. It's on the other side of the world, but it does, because everybody affects everybody else. And it says, neither can we call this a begging of misery or a borrowing of misery, as though we were not miserable enough of ourselves but must fetch in more from the next house, and taking upon us the misery of our neighbors. So he's saying, like, it's not like you're trying to be more miserable by thinking about others. He said, truly it were excusable covetousness if we did, for affliction is a treasure, and scarce any man hath enough of it. It's an interesting thing that he says here. He says, no man hath affliction enough that is not matured and ripened by it, and made fit for God by that affliction. If a man carry treasure in bullion or in a wedge of gold, and have none coined into current monies, his treasure will not defray him as he travels. Tribulation is treasure in the nature of it, but it is not current money in the use of it, except we get nearer and nearer our home heaven by it. Another man may be sick too, and sick to death, and this affliction may lie in his bowels as gold in a mine, and be of no use to him, because he's about to die. But this bell that tells me of this affliction digs out and applies that gold to me. If this by this consideration of another's danger I take mine own into contemplation, and so secure myself by making my recourse to my God, who is our only security. So he's saying, like, in thinking about others and in considering the problems of others and in thinking about, like, what it is that others go through and, like, how hard other people's lives are, that makes us better people because we're aware of the problems of everybody, and it makes us more well-rounded people. And which is another problem I have with students. They're like, I don't read. I don't like to read. Reading's stupid, or, like, I just don't have time to read, or like you have a certain subject you think is lame, or I don't like this subject, I don't like that subject, or like people who are like they think school is stupid, they don't want to learn. They're like, I don't have to learn this stuff, it's pointless. And then later we'll think vaccines are something that they shouldn't be forced to do because could cause autism, which has been totally disproven, which somebody would know if they read science. But if you don't like science, you don't want to, and you don't think you should have to, then you want to make decisions about what's important in life based on things that you don't even know, which is silliness. Nobody values education anymore because nobody values others. Right? Sure. We done? I'm going to go ahead and add some stuff to the end of the video that's research paper related. It should be completely and totally relevant. I'll try to find the best clip that I can from another class where they're talking about the research paper and how to write it, how to structure it. So watch that for more details. It's essentially just turning the thesis planning into a more detailed it's like taking the thesis that you were telling me about in the planning and using those sources to make the argument that's in your thesis over the course of a paper, however it is you feel that should be structured. I do have one thing I need to say to whoever wrote the planning on Gulliver's Travels. I need to ask them a question real quick before I can approve it or even grade it. I think other than that, everybody, we can go. And of course, I'll take questions of those who need questions.
I was the one that did it.
Was it you? Okay, so I was going to ask, on your Gulliver's Travels paper, before I grade it, are you going to be writing about all of the book or just the first part that's with him being a giant and them being little people?
With him being a giant. Well, that's how I thought of it. I'm not 100%, but probably with him being a giant.
Okay, because I was going to tell you, go ahead and stick to just that because that's the only part of the book we are reading. Is the introduction and that part. We're not reading the part where he finds the people with the flying city or he's tiny or the horses that talk.
Okay.
We're not doing any of those
stick
parts.
to that part.
Okay, good. Stick to that part. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and grade it now.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Hey, what was didn't you send me an email too about a paper?
Yes. I resent it. I resent another. I felt like I was bothering you, but I resent another email.
With the paper attached to it?
The first email was with the paper attached, and the second email was a reminder that I sent you an email with the paper attached.
Okay, so
I don't know if you got it.
Yeah, don't send the paper through. I did email you back that first time, but I don't know if it came to your email.
I don't think it did, and I don't know how to check that.
You mean like the Dragon Mail email?
Oh, okay, so it's Dragon Mail.
Yeah, so it probably went to your Dragon Mail. If you email me through Blackboard, it went right back to your Dragon Mail. So what I think I said was instead of emailing me the paper, submit it on Blackboard just to the same place that you submitted the first time and the second time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet. Whew. Y'all have a good one. Have a great weekend. Goodness gracious. 2 hours even. Okay, you're going to see a more detailed discussion of this, I think, after, where I posted a video from a class from last semester. I actually think it was a 1302 class, but it's relatively the same research paper that we use. And you're going to see a more detailed version of that after this, but there's something that's not quite covered in that video that I looked at, and I wanted to make sure I covered it here. So real quick, I want to show you that I've added down here to the research argumentation essay section 2 different links. One is to a document, Word document, and one is a PDF. I'll go ahead and open the PDF because I imagine most people are going to do that. But it's a PDF of the kind of a loose rubric of how I grade these research papers, and the things that are most important appear at the top, and the stuff that's still important but not of as high importance as the other stuff that's above. So the thesis, and basically, since everything centers around your thesis in this paper, with the story, poem, real world issue, making a claim how they compare, directly stating why that comparison is being made, not just they relate, but how, and being very specific about that. That's really important to the whole paper, and the paper can't function without it. That's why I have that at the top. And then next below that is that you have to make sure that you've got sources within the paper. If you don't have sources, I'm not actually going to grade it. I did not mention that in class, so I hope people don't turn it in without a works cited page. If you don't have a works cited page, you don't have internal citation, I'm not going to grade your paper. I'll give it a 0 and say, please provide these items. And if that's the case, I hope that we can head some of that off with this video. But if not, oh gosh, I really hope we do. So with the works cited page, sources are cited when claims are made. Those have to be done before I can even grade your paper, or it's going to have a 0 until then. Then I want to make sure that your logic and arguing the thesis is extremely important, and that your sources are relevant to the purposes that you're trying to make after that. So logic's more important in this paper because it's the point that you're making that nobody's made before. This original connection between the research and the research of the world event and the literature. That's something that should be originating with you and it's never happened before. Down below after that is the introductions, including everything it needs to, which is basically, I think, going to have to follow the sample paper model, which is, it starts with introducing some concept that's similar between the two, like hypocrisy, and it moves on to talk about the relevant stuff from the story to the real world issue. Then it sums up the real world issue real quick. Then it moves on to the thesis. So it actually takes till the 4th paragraph, the very first line of the 4th paragraph, until the thesis even comes up. But if people don't get that introduction exactly right, I do know the literature. I generally know most of these world issues that are going to pop up. So it's not a too terrible, as terrible, I guess you could say, if the introduction's not there and not perfect as it is if certain other things aren't perfect. And then ethos is stuff like grammatical errors not being there, typographical errors, spelling errors. Having some variance in the essay would be important. Making sure you're writing in third person, not insulting the reader by certain different types of writing, and then making sure you provide helpful transitions. All that stuff is included in that last little bit. Doesn't mean it's not important, it just means that it's less important. I'll talk about that more in detail on the other. Now there is something that's not included at all on the other video that comes later, which is the research balance checklist. Basically, I need for certain things to happen with your research. And it's this. There have to be 6 sources on your works cited page, with the literature book being the 6th source. I don't want any Spark Notes, Cliffs Notes, or Schmoop on any of your sources. I don't want Wikipedia about.com, Ask.com. I want everything from the databases. So whether you're getting an academic search complete, opposing viewpoints, a combination of the two, or all on academic search complete, they have to be from the college databases. I want all 5 of your articles to be written by different named authors, all 5 of your articles written by different sponsors, so different publications as well. And I'd like for it to be 3 separate geographic locations. It's very hard sometimes to figure out what that even means, like where they're published, when it comes to periodicals like scholarly journals. I want the 5 articles to contain little to no bias. I want them to be, fairly well written but not be biased articles. Whether they're any type of article, you should aim to use research that's not biased. That I want your 1 or 2 story related articles to be from academic journals only. And really, I'd prefer that to be the case for your real world issue articles as well. The problem is sometimes you want to use a news article, like the sample paper uses Westboro Baptist Church news articles, because there's not a whole lot of actual research on the Westboro Baptist Church, and that's kind of hard to come by, but he still had a great example. And I want the 3 to 4 issue related articles that you have not be brief articles. Sometimes you can just click articles when you're doing the research, like I did in the other video. So it'll find you the full articles. But if you do notice that something's brief, or it's like a book review or something, please avoid it. No articles are written about the comparison you're making. So basically, I want this to be something that originates with you, this concept of relating these 2 things. I don't want you to go, oh, there's an article already written on that thing I want to talk about. I'll just use that. I don't want you doing that. It's going to be very hard for you not to just be a parrot or a puppet of that original source material. So I want you to kind of ignore any of those pre-existing arguments. I was going to say conditions. Now, I want your thesis to directly state or imply the importance of the comparison being made between the story and the world issue. Basically, don't just state that there's a comparison that exists, like, oh, look, they relate. Like, that's not what I want this paper to be. That's simple comparison, contrast. I want this to be comparing the 2 for a reason. Both of them are accomplishing something, or we could learn about the for example, I was reading an article today about the history of the Peloponnesian War, written by a Greek historian called Thucydides, 500 years before the birth of Christ. And
the people who are in Trump's White House right now have been paying attention, especially General Mattis. He's very familiar with the Peloponnesian War, and there were two superpowers, Athens and Sparta, at the time. Now, granted, these books are histories; they're not literature, so it's not quite as relevant. But imagine there was a fictional story on the Peloponnesian War that we were reading for class, like a Chaucer's. One of the tales is about the Peloponnesian War and like two cities warring against each other. Sparta was the old power. Athens was an up-and-coming new power. And eventually, because they were both so powerful, this war just kind of resulted, and there was seemingly nothing they could do about it. They tried to talk their way out of it, but the war happened nonetheless. And so these people now are studying in Trump's White House. They're studying the Peloponnesian War because this could have happened with America and China. So it's not just saying, oh, look how America and China are similar to Sparta and Athens. It's saying this must be looked at because what could result is an actual physical war between China and America that ends very badly for one city or the other. There's actually a book by a guy named Allison, I think, where he's written about 16 times throughout history where wars like this have happened, Peloponnesian War being one of them. And of those 16 times it's happened in history, 12 of them resulted in war. Only 4 were amicably talked out. So, you know, it's a pretty big deal. So we're looking at big deal stuff that could affect the world, could affect people, could affect how we relate to each other. Not just saying, hey, look how wife of Bath is similar to women today. That's neat. No, there needs to be a reason for it. And I've also got, that's not just necessary, but down here I also prefer, and it says preferred, but I really require now that all sources be from the college databases. And I really prefer that the world issue that you have be some problem brought about by human relationships. These are problems of politics, domestic issues, violence, war, race, culture, etc., or at least framed as such. So cosmetic surgery is a solitary thing. You get cosmetic surgery on your own, by yourself. But it could be reframed as people are getting them as a result of their sensitivity to others' judgments. And so they get cosmetic surgery as a way to battle their own problems of self-esteem that result of the treatment of others. So I really do want this in all cases to be something that your papers are shooting for. I may go ahead and just real quick take us one more time. And I say one more time, we never actually did this in class. So I think it's happened in one of the videos, but I just wanted one more time, in addition to whatever videos I've covered, I would like to read the sample paper and go through it and what it does well really quick. So I'm going to scroll down to the end of our document for the research paper assignment document and read the sample paper real quick. Now I want to take you through something that I do. In fact, I'll probably do this on Microsoft Word because something that I do before I even start reading the paper is really important here. Because remember I talked about the thesis is the most important thing to the paper, but then sources being in place are next, like internal citations and works cited page. I literally won't grade your paper until those things are in place. So there's actually a specific action that I go through whenever I read a paper. It usually happens on Blackboard and the viewer, but I can do the same thing in Microsoft Word fairly easily. So if I scroll down at the paper here on the document, you'll see here's the top of the paper, and that's what you recognize it to be is the top of a paper. You might think that okay, Nichols is just going to start reading right here and he'll start going, but that's not what I do. I have to make sure that the research is in place first, otherwise I can't verify that it's not a plagiarized paper. So until I know that there's research that's accounted for and cited in the paper, I can't know for sure that it's not plagiarized. So the very first thing I will actually do is scroll down, and I will check to make sure that 5 of the sources and the literature are mentioned. So I'm going to search for each one of these. Computer's slower than I am. So Barrett Fox was on the works cited page, and Barrett Fox is in the paper as well, internally cited. So I'm going to go back down and at least once. There we go. Good. So that's 1. So I can account for that. Boone, do you appear more than once in the paper? Yep, you appear here at the top in the internal citation. and also there, and then also on the works cited page. Now let's check for Ferris. Ferris appears within the paper, internally cited, also on the works cited page. There we go. So that's 3. Then we have Friedman. Friedman appears within the paper. Also appears on the works cited page. Now, I'm not saying that it's well, let me get to the end of this first. Hawthorne, I did see Minister's Black Veil was mentioned, so the primary work is mentioned. I don't know that Hawthorne's name is actually mentioned, which is, kind of a mistake, but Minister's Black Veil is. And I know that that's written by Hawthorne, so I'm not as much of a stickler on that in that particular case. But most people should try to mention the author directly. The Holy Bible, I got to make sure that the Bible is mentioned. Yep, there it is. It's talked about directly. And then let's check for Jonson. There's Jonson. So now I'm going to count the sources at the end that I looked at, and we have Barrett, Boone, Ferris, Friedman, Hawthorne. Bible's not technically a source written about it. It's a kind of a reference work on the side. And then Jonson. So that's 6 sources total. Hawthorne is a literature source, so I got to make sure that there's at least 1 or 2 about the literature, at least 3 or 4 about the real world issue in this case. Western Baptist Church is the first one. Minister's Black Veil the second one. Morality Without Intention, I believe, talks about Minister's Black Veil, or not the Western Baptist Church. Hawthorne's Veil, at the end another Western Baptist Church. So we have 3 on the world issue, and we have 2 on the story, and we have the story itself. So there we go. So the balance is right. Down below, I talk about make sure that you don't say that Julia Reedhead or Julie Reedhead or anything like that is the author of your literary work, because it's not. Hawthorne wrote Minister's Black Veil. Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales. So make sure that you get that author right. The person who collected the anthology, that's not the author, that's just a collector of the anthology, and that should be later on in the citation. As you can see here, Julia Reedhead. I've made it where everything that's here is correct. All you have to change is the page numbers and the author's name and the citation. So I've actually, technically speaking, Norton Anthology of English Literature does not contain this story on any page. But I left it like this so that you could use that citation directly. All you have to do is change things out. Once I've verified that I can grade this, then I'll go and start reading, which I'm going to do now, and show you what this thing does well, and what you should shoot for when you're putting your paper together this weekend. So let's close this Control F window. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So the first thing he does in the introduction is he sets up a problem with humanity. So he says, sin is an immoral action which is said to be a transgression against divine law. Human nature tends to defy divine law upon many circumstances due to its brash impulses. This, of course, is well noted within the status quo society and is nothing short of typical. However, it's only when attention is brought to these foul actions that unbalanced shifts between true morality and hypocrisy are caused. Honestly, that paragraph's a little confusing to me. Lots of things are talked about. I wish it was just more directly talking about the problem of hypocrisy, because it's one of the last couple words that's mentioned, but since that's mainly the subject of the paper is hypocrisy and how that's bad, that's what I think he's trying to introduce. So not the best first paragraph, but it is accomplishing much of what I'm trying to get it to accomplish. Now, down below, he references the story. So he starts out by introducing the story a little bit. So we have a problem of society and then the story. In the story of the Minister's Black Veil, Reverend Hooper mysteriously begins to wear a veil for unexplained reasons. Though Hooper was a respected man of his residence, the townsfolk began to shun him because of his new peculiar appearance. Despite the fact that Hooper had not changed anything about his actions and had remained the same compassionate minister throughout the story, the citizens of Milford only recognized him by his outward being. From this, the reader begins to get a feeling of animosity between the town and the Reverend. And I guess that means that Ferris article is actually a literature article, which is, I mean, that's fine. If you have a 3-2 balance the other way, if he got enough out of the news articles for Westboro Baptist Church, that's fine. So he frames this specifically not from the minister's perspective, but it seems more so from the townsfolk and their perception of him perspective. So you can reframe the summary of the story that you provide, or the information, the background information of the story that you provide or poem, in whatever way you think is necessary to help make. Like if you're doing, Wife of Bath's prologue, there's no reason, and you don't need the tale, then just talk about the prologue. Don't talk about the tale whatsoever, if that's not relevant to what you're trying to do. Or the tale, don't talk about the Wife of Bath's prologue, if that's necessary. So only summarize and provide background information for what you need contextually for your paper. So now I have hypocrisy been introduced. Now I have Minister's Black Veil. The story has been introduced, and so he's done it in his own way. And then we got to have the real world issue be introduced. In modern times, the Westboro Baptist Church has begun to publicly persecute those that they see as unholy and sinful. The church came into the public's notice whenever they protested the funeral of Matthew Shepard, who was beaten to death for being homosexual. Since 1991, the church has held over 41,000 protests. Picketing events range from military funerals to high school theater productions. Over the years, they've continued to show their disdain for those who stray against the Calvinist faith by provocatively voicing their God Hates Fags campaign. So you have the idea of hypocrisy introduced. You have the story itself introduced. Then you have the real world issue introduced. Now, what he's going to try to do is take all three of those introductions together, then combine it into a thesis that combines all three. And that's the argument he's going to be making the rest of the paper. And it says, here's a thesis right here. And I think this is a good spot for anybody to put it. Hawthorne's portrayal of the hypocritical townsfolk in Minister's Black Veil is nearly identical to the protests of the Westboro Baptist Church in a sense that both claim a profound level of morality, yet only notice when others around them commit sin, never themselves. So what you can see is he's directly talking about hypocrisy of claiming a high level of morality. So he's being very clear about exactly in what way they are hypocritical. Showing that the Minister's Black Veil, Westboro Baptist Church, the townsfolk there, and those people at the church are acting similarly. He shows this throughout the paper. I don't know that I'm going to go through and read the entire thing. I probably should. I've got plenty of time here, and anybody who wants to watch can. I'll just quickly take you through an outline, though, and show you that he sets up the way Hawthorne acts at. He says Westboro Baptist Church and like what they do at the funeral, damning gays to hell. Reverend Hooper attends funerals as well, which sounds like a surface level observation, but he gets into the details as to why it's not. Because they frequently protest at military funerals. That God hates fags, even if it's not somebody who was a homosexual who's being buried, which is very strange. But he points out that minister is being very respectful at the funeral, as people should be. But in his story, the townsfolk are gossiping while he's at the funeral. And in the same way, people who are the actual families of or attendees of the funeral, they're being respectful like the minister. But the Westboro Baptist Church are not being respectful. They're just all about their agenda, and both groups are having actions highly inappropriate to a funeral, gossip and picketing homosexuals. And then we have, let me see, insulting attendance. Oh, he's on his deathbed and he says, "Why do you tremble? All of you have, to me, a veil." And so that's something that actually doesn't happen in the Westboro Baptist Church case, but it's kind of setting up what could happen. So he says that I look out from my perspective. You all think that I'm wearing this black veil, and I look out, and on you I see a veil in all of you. So it's like a problem in perspective. He looks out, and because he's behind the veil, to him everybody has the veil because it's in his purview and it's going around everybody. Sorry, you keep hearing my email sounds. So he ends up telling everybody at the end, you thought that I was the one that should be judged, but you're the ones who should be judged. You're the one who've been hypocrites the entire time by judging me. And they're like, oh, you kind of get the implication that that's the reveal. Now, the Westboro Baptist Church haven't had that reveal. They basically are committing what could be termed as hate crimes in the way that they're expressing themselves, according to some. And they need somebody to say, they need like a godlike figure to come and say, hey, you think that you're judging them, but it's more important how you're being judged for the way that you're treating them. And the student here does something really smart, which is cites the Bible. Not because the Bible, he's not using it as a research text saying that that's how people should live. He's saying that both the townsfolk in the Ministers of Black Veil and the Westboro Baptist Church of the real world use the Christian Bible as their handbook of faith, and claim to be following it in the actions that they're pursuing. So he says that according to verse John 7:24, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. Nobody's doing that for the minister. They're judging him. And so that's going against the very words of the Bible, and it says that the people in Westboro Baptist Church do as well. They say there's only one lawgiver and judge in James 4:12 who is able to save and destroy, but who are you to judge your neighbor? And Westboro Baptist Church people are doing exactly that. They're judging their neighbors every day. And so what he's saying is not that it's necessarily bad that they're not following their religious texts. What he's saying is that neither group is following their religious texts and is doing the opposite. So both groups are being hypocrites. So he's not saying whether it's right or wrong that they're following their religious text. He's just saying it's hypocritical not to do so in their case. And I thought that was fantastic. So you can read the paper. The sample paper is available for everybody to read. I don't think I'm going to go through it. I think me summarizing the arguments there is just fine. And I would hope that everybody can come up with those unique arguments that are related to the story itself or the poem and the arguments that are being made there, and something that you can relate to the real world. I've heard a lot of great ideas out there that I've seen so far, which aren't very many. But when I'm looking at this paper, I'm really checking for, as you can see, it goes thesis, sources, then it goes logic. So I'm really looking to make sure that you're making a logical argument based on the idea that's inherent in the thesis, that you're really pointing out the similarities between these things that you're linking, and that logically looks to be the case, looks to be really well done. So that's what's really going to shine forth here, is your ability to argue that case and that similarity, and why that similarity is important should shine through. I can see that it's bad to be a hypocrite and having people who say God hates fags who are saying also God is love. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on their don't judge others aspect of the Bible that they're seemingly ignoring. And he points that out quite well. So I don't think I'm going to read this whole paper and go through it. I've pointed out to you the rubric and kind of the way I approach it, that I actually will give you a 0 on the research elements being missing until you give it to me, and you can resubmit, of course, if you forget to do that. The reason I'm reticent to give you points on the rubric is because anything done badly enough can ruin everything. For example, if I go to a job interview, I think I mentioned this in the video that I'm attaching later, but if I go to a job interview and I'm doing a fantastic job and I tell them everything that they want to hear, I have all the right answers, and for this job, the teaching job, I actually have to do a teaching demonstration. And let's say that my teaching demonstration goes great and they think it's fantastic, and then afterwards they're deliberating on how who to pick, and they say, well, obviously he was the best candidate. He had the best teaching demonstration. All his answers are exactly what we're looking for. He seems to have a great attitude, all of those things. He's also great on paper. However, let's assume that day I did all of that while wearing denim cutoff shorts, otherwise known as Daisy Dukes, and a wife beater style tank top, very thin ribbed white tank with the long holes on the side, and it's got like oil stains and mustard stains on it. And I did all of my teaching demonstration interview that day wearing that. They would probably come to the conclusion that despite the fact that I had the best answers and I did a teaching demonstration, that we can't hire this guy because we can't have a guy teaching in a classroom like that. And so despite the fact that, exactly what you're wearing and like say the grammar in an essay might not have that big of a bearing on the points you would think, if it's done badly enough, it could ruin everything. Like if I literally can't figure out what you're trying to say in your paper because the grammar and spelling are so atrocious, I generally don't factor grammar and spelling that highly into a grade, but if I literally can't read what you're saying, I can't grade it. And so it becomes bad to a point that's affecting and bringing down everything else you've done that's good, because I can't physically figure it out what you're trying to say. Anything done badly enough can ruin other things done well. You could say that old sports team adage, a team is only strong as its weakest member. Think of it like that. That's why I don't provide points on a rubric, because anything done badly enough can ruin the rest. So I'm also going to attach that next bit, for further clarification. And I really hope that you read thoroughly the sample paper and the arguments there and kind of look for what you're needing to do. If you do have any questions, you can email me, like always, and I'll try to answer them quickly over the course of this weekend. I'll start grading research papers probably as soon as I start getting them in, and try to get those back to you relatively quickly so that you can revise as fast as possible. So right after this, there's going to be more video. I won't be sitting directly in front of the computer. I'll be talking to an entire class. You can see on the video, and so my voice will not always be the loudest, but it'll generally be pretty loud. I can't think of any other things I need to say. How long have I been recording just sitting here? It feels like 25 minutes. 28 minutes. Pretty good. I was going to say 30, so I guess I was still kind of in the right ballpark. Y'all have a great weekend. Have fun writing the paper. Try to enjoy it, because you're doing something that really stretches the mind and honestly should be fun. But how am I going to convince students that the research paper itself is fun? It's a lost cause. Y'all have a great weekend. But I want to talk real quick. This is a rubric, but it's a loosely formed rubric. Y'all heard that term before? A rubric? Oh, I can stand and talk about this. I'll just scroll down every once in a while. So this has been placed on the research argumentation essay now. Should I put it on the planning too, just so you can see it in both places?
Yes.
Because I got the checklist here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that too. Which, since I've already seen it now, I know exactly where it is. That won't be difficult. And I can talk about it essentially while I'm doing it. No, I can't. That's a lie. I probably can't talk about it. Week 12, day 1, rubric PDF, open, slide down. Nope, slide down. Submit. Boosh. I said boosh. Okay. So you'll be right there where you can access all of them. We got the PDF here. We got the PDF there. I don't believe these are accessible from the app. Am I incorrect on that? Has anybody ever tried to use the Blackboard app? And that's just basically a place to look at your grades, right?
Oh, I got it.
You can do
But it's my
yours.
Android. So.
It's your Android? Okay. So you've jailbreak the thing?
No, I just have.
Oh.
I downloaded Adobe.
You just have you downloaded what?
Adobe.
Oh, well, that's easy. So if you can figure out Android, iPhone locks that crap down so you can't do anything. I did not mean to I was just adjusting my phone in my pocket, but when I said iPhone, it was when I did it. It was just two opposite, things that weren't related that just happened. So it looked like I was, somebody who's got really nice gold chains, who's going, or what did it pop in a collar, being look at my shirt. And I was just iPhone. I just don't know what I meant to do, but I realized it might have come across that way, so I apologize for that. iPhone what? I got this. I'm not cool. I think we've established that. So here's how the rubric works, okay? So it says check boxes for all that apply to each paper, but that's really talking about yours. I should change that and then re-upload it, because that's weird, because there is no paper. What is it talking about? These are listed in order of importance to grade. So it's not like some rubrics you've seen. Y'all know what a rubric is. Y'all said that. Y'all seen them. But they usually have a point assignment on it, where this many points for this. Mine doesn't do that.
Agreed.
And the reason for that is, in English, since it's a subjective thing, it's very possible that somebody could do something so badly that it could bring down the rest of the paper. For example, if you're I did all this other stuff great, and he has 20 points assigned for the research, well, I just won't do that because it's too hard. And they only lose 20 points. I don't like that. I don't like that being a possibility. So to me, the research is not there, then I give you a 0 until you include it. And I feel like that's something that's true. The research paper without the research, all you have is the paper. Pointless. So these are in order of kind of the importance of the grade and what I will kind of mark off for. Now it's a little bit different, but not that much different,
than 1301 for those who took me. So the containing a thesis aspect is still like the most important thing. And it needs to appear immediately after introduction. So, or in the introduction, I'm sorry. Now I do want to ask a question real quick. That means it's going to be at the end of which paragraph? If the thesis is at the end of an introduction? The thesis is at the end of the introduction, which is the end of which paragraph?
Oh, first paragraph.
No.
All of them.
It doesn't, I mean, it's just depending on how long it takes to introduce.
Yes. I did mention that we first went over the research papers that introduction takes as long as it takes to introduce. So the thesis will be at the end of that. If you'll notice, where did I say that the sample paper's thesis happened?
It's the third paragraph.
It was the first sentence of the third paragraph.
Close, all of you. First sentence of the fourth paragraph.
Ah.
But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily where yours is going to be. It might be the end of the. I just think it naturally might fall there though, because it's an introduction. The first paragraph is probably going to be like, here's an issue with humanity, like an emotional issue. I think that he introduces hypocrisy basically, and the nature of sin, which I didn't really like. I wish you just stuck with hypocrisy. But then he says, here's what the story is, and frames it specifically about the townspeople, even though most of the story seems like it's about the minister. And then he spends the third paragraph going, well, here's what the Westboro Baptist Church is, and you kind of start to, when you're reading, connecting the dots, like, okay, I'm seeing how these relate. And then he goes, they're similar in this way. And you're like, ah, but that's not until the beginning of the fourth paragraph. So you have a lot of time to build it. As long as the thesis happens at the end of your introduction, that means the period in which you're introducing everything needed to explain this to the reader, then it works. So I really don't think it's going to be at the end of your first paragraph. Yes?
So if it's an argumentative essay, why does it compare so much? Like it compares more than
What you're really trying to, and you make a good point, is that mostly what I get from students is a glorified comparison contrast.
Yeah, but that's what mine's starting.
But that doesn't mean that's what's going to get an A. Because the students who just do the comparison contrast aspect are missing the argumentation aspect, and the argumentation aspect is essentially arguing an implied aspect of the thesis, which is the lessons within the poem or story are important and would fix this situation in the world if people paid attention to it. So you're essentially arguing that some aspect of like if you look at the sample paper, the Minister's Black Veil, he's arguing that Hawthorne exposes a problem with humanity, and that's that they tend to be hypocrites about things. And the Westboro Baptist Church, he says, they're doing the same thing, but he's implying that they shouldn't be, just like the townsfolk shouldn't have been. So if you just tell me like these two, look how these two things compare, but I don't ever get the sense that you think one of them is bad, or that one of them needs work, or here's what needs to be fixed about the other thing, there's not really a point, and it does just turn into a comparison and contrast paper.
I can put my opinion in.
Here's the thing. A lot of, as an English teacher, and I have trouble doing this, but I think of things in very different levels than a lot of maybe students do. Because I understand that when talking with students about like for example, when I told students before, like, watch out for bias in research. A lot of students would look for if somebody disagreed with their point and say, that's bias. Like if somebody doesn't like Trump's wall, that's bias because I like Trump's wall. Or if somebody says that Trump's wall is awesome and I don't like Trump's wall, is that the same thing you're saying?
No.
Okay, then that's bias. But bias is not just disagreeing with your opinion. Bias is somebody seemingly having an emotional connection to whatever it is they're arguing to the point that it clouds their judgment. For example, like somebody might flip because of bias on their gun beliefs. Like, I think everybody should have the right to own guns.
Then they have a gun in their closet, ends up shooting their own kid because a kid tried to play with it. And they're like, nobody should have guns. You know, that person has not flipped for a logical reason. They flipped because something happened to them in an emotional way. Or in the class last semester, it was like that lawyer who wanted to get rid of student loans, and we looked up how much he probably owed in student loans. It was like 250 grand. So he had quite a motivation to want to get rid of that. That's a bias. So with this paper, when you ask, like, can I put my opinion in it? Not really.
That's what I thought, yeah.
In sense of, like, here's the thing. For example, I was talking to a student this morning about the possibility, you know, having trouble with, like, what paper do I write? Because they proposed a couple of ideas to me, and they were just too general to work. Because it was kind of like, I want to compare Battle Royal to racism. And I'm like, that's literally what that story's about. You can't do that. They're like, oh, okay. Well, how about the birthmark and discriminating against people with birthmarks? And I'm like, that's the same thing. Like, you can't keep doing that. So they're like, okay, what do I do? And so I said, well, how about, I said, if you're really strapped for a topic, one that might work, and it wasn't actually those topics that I was mentioning, but so they were kind of in this area of like Frost, and so I said, well, what about this Frost poem? Mending Wall. And I said, Trump's Wall. I said, what about that? And they said, well, it's Frost, so I think I'd be okay with that. And I said, here's the prompt. Regardless of your personal opinion on the wall, okay? So like, for example, you may hate or love the idea of the wall, and that's your opinion. Regardless, Frost in that poem is arguing against the necessity of walls because of who it might offend. Mm-hmm. At least questioning whether walls are needed, you know? And the implication at the end of that poem is probably not. I know what's yours, you know what's mine. It's very clear, so walls aren't necessary. They just maybe give offense to people who go, why do you think you need a wall here? What do you think, I'm going to come over there and steal your crap? You know? So that poem was very clearly arguing that one side. So if you were to argue in your paper, you would have to argue that essentially, if we paid attention to what Frost's message was, we wouldn't build this wall, and that would be the right choice. And that's regardless of whether your opinion is the wall should or shouldn't be there. So your opinion exists, but that doesn't mean you include it in the paper, because I think your opinion is different than your argument. You will pick a side in the paper, and you will argue that side. So that makes it argumentative. But that may not necessarily be the thing that you personally believe. But the reader will almost have no sense of what your actual personal opinion is. And in a little bit, we will read that paper again, and I'll kind of go through some of these aspects of that paper, the sample paper. But if you look, it's a paper about Christians being hypocrites in two different scenarios. And I can't tell if the kid's a Christian or not when I read that paper. The kid may go to church, he may not. He seems like he looked up some Bible verses, but I don't know whether that kid is personally a Christian or not. And I really shouldn't from anybody's paper. So, I mean, if you do write the Mending Wall and Trump's Wall paper, I should have no idea at the end whether you think it's a good idea, just what Frost seems to think is a good idea. So I'm trying to separate here opinion from argument, because they're, you know.
So instead of putting your opinion or like your bias, you just put what Frost, like how would Frost handle it?
Yeah, you're looking at how would this situation be fixed if Frost was in charge, if Frost's poem was the deciding factor.
Okay.
And then research should create that behind it. If you have the research, you should build your point instead of your own personal point.
And here's a different way that research is used in this paper as well. And one of the reasons, this is going to be weird for those who've had me for 1301, but it starts with thesis, then works cited, sources are there, but I don't know if you'll notice that the logic and sources are relevant sections are flipped. Because in this paper, your ability to logically create this argument is more important than the sources helping you to make the point. Because they're not really going to be arguing what you're arguing.
Making them argue what you're arguing.
You're basically using them for information that will then give you the argument. You know, it's like doing an argument completely from statistical data tables.
Right.
Numbers don't say anything what we use the numbers for says something. So that's the sense that the sources are being used. But you'll find that you should find no paper that's like Frost's wall, Trump's wall. Let's compare. Like if you do find that paper, don't read it, because then you'd have to cite it, and then I'd be like, you stole this. In fact, I would, if I had to be a betting man, I would bet within 3 years we're going to see an article somewhere about Frost's wall and Trump's wall.
There already is.
There already is?
Yeah.
Really? It's on there?
Yeah, it's on one of the databases.
Which one?
I don't know.
It's got to be search complete, right?
I'm pretty sure it is.
Don't read it. Did you read it?
I opened it, I saw it, it said maybe wall and Trump's wall, so I'm thinking that.
Get out. Already? That was fast. How did you get that published?
It was up there.
It's been like a couple months since he said, I'm going to build this thing. How do you already have articles out?
It was popular.
That's true, he's popular.
Plus, also, he's been talking about that wall for over a year because he was campaigning on the wall.
Yeah, I guess it's people like me who wouldn't think to write an article about it, because I was like, I don't think he would be president. He was an apprentice. He's the apprentice. You know, how's he going to be president? And then he becomes president. I was like, you know, because I think most Texans thought, we didn't get Cruz through. There's no way Trump is going to be president. Kind of, it's like, look at all these crazy people around the country who didn't vote for Cruz. Now we got Trump, I guess, is kind of what people thought in Texas for the most part that I talked to. And everybody's like, still got a Republican president. Didn't expect that to happen. I thought it was going to be Hillary. Bonus. What's he going to do? And it's kind of like, if you're a Texas Republican, you kind of win no matter what, right? Because Cruz isn't the guy that treats Trump, right? So you're like, if he does something good, like if he does something great with the president, Republicans. But if he screws up, you're like, we wanted Cruz. It's just like, there's no way you can lose as a Texan here. Well, I guess unless the wall goes up.
Right.
Because, so much of our trade happens in Mexico. But that's just from an economical, I'm not with a political standpoint, it's different.
What if we just put a gate in the wall so we can still trade through?
I tried to do it with my dogs this weekend. I built a gate so the dogs can't touch the baby that's not here yet. And then I regretted not buying one with a gate in it. So I was like, I have to physically move this wall every time I want them to come through. It's unfortunate. Did you hear they're going to have a wall at the border where you cross? Like it raises up and goes down. Like where the cars drive through. I made that up. That's totally not true. So you're like, oh my God, that's so expensive. No, it's not real. What was the real question I heard coming from this direction? Elijah?
What if the problem or story you choose doesn't show the fix to the problem, but only bring it to awareness?
You make a good point, but what is the? Do you have one that's an example?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll give one that's an example. So, I had a paper years ago, and I really don't like people to write this paper, so don't. I think I tried to shut this paper down if it ever happened. So if I already approved this essay for you, go ahead and write it. It's fine. I already approved it. You have proof. You can be like, he approved this. It's right here. I got a 10. But like Lady with the Pet Dog and Adultery, that's one where I'm like, you're like, hey, look. Lady with the Pet Dog brings to light problems with adultery.
Well, like with the one I chose, much madness is a divinest sin forever. And it,
I think I remember this. I think I felt like this.
Instead of progressing, because everyone's going for this whole progressivism thing, and it's getting out of hand in some places, and it's just encouraging judgmentalism and all that kind of stuff. So the story itself doesn't say, okay, here's a fix to the problem. It's more so just look at all the people doing, jumping on the bandwagon, and look at what I'm not doing, and look how happy I am. Look at how happy, I guess they are collectively, but not as at an individual level.
Yeah, that's fine. In fact, that sounds a lot like the sample thesis that I had on the assignment itself. So it's talked about death of the salesman and Edward Snowden. The guy at the end of a death of a salesman committed suicide. Nothing like that has happened with the government yet. I haven't seen the government just completely commit suicide. So, I mean, I think that that's fine. If you really just sort of bringing awareness to a problem, not necessarily finding a solution, that's a fine thing. So in your case, Much Madness is defined as sense saying that the nature of progressivism these days getting out of hand to the point that whereas being progressive is a good idea, but when you're taking it to the place like, I'm assuming you're talking about things like safe spaces, microaggressions.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. All the stuff that South Park made fun of last season.
Last night, you said?
No, last season.
Oh, last season. I don't know. It's just like your opinion is, everybody should be able to express their opinion unless it goes against mine, that kind of thing, from the majority. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I like that idea. And I probably will tell you about something like that. If I don't approve of the kind of thing you're planning on doing with your thesis when you propose it to me, I probably will have said something like that. Like, I'm worried about blank, but go ahead and move forward. Did I say something like that to you? That's fine. I can't see a problem. I guess I shouldn't ask that anybody else get something that was like, I'm worried about blank, because that's not something I would want you to mention in class. Let me continue back here. I'm going to scroll back up and go through this thing. I like that we have more room for questions. I feel like usually when I'm doing this thing, I'm just like, mention, next. But now I feel like the questions is really helpful. By the way, if you have any question during this, ask it. Even about the labs, what do they do? Week 13, day 2. Yes?
Is it possible to use a tweet inside a research paper and it's like that?
Yes, you can. However, do not cite it as one of your major 5 sources. So don't be like, yes, tweet's going to get me out of one. But there is, and I don't know if this is the problem with the simplification of the MLA handbook in the 8th edition and becoming much thinner. That's what this book's MLA section is based on, the writer's reference. If you kept it, good for you. If you didn't, probably should always keep this from 1301 to 1302 because you're going to have it. In here, I believe they have last one that you can cite, Directory to MLA Works Cited Models, Twitter post tweet. Very last one in the book, in the MLA section. So they show you how to do it here. But I've noticed that there's been some problems since they've simplified MLA, supposedly. Difficulty looking it up on the Purdue OWL, which is what a lot of people use, which is the online writing lab for Purdue University. It's called the Purdue OWL. That's where a lot of people find online their MLA rules. It's become more difficult to search for things on their website because things have become too simple. Kind of like I'm pissed off now that I got Netflix updated. Anybody notice this? Mm-hmm. Netflix updated and said, you like the movie, give it a thumbs up. You don't, give it a thumbs down. This is not why I use you, Netflix. I use you so I can lord over that Shawshank Redemption's a 5-star. But Vanilla Sky is a 4-star. I can't just be like, I dislike or dislike. I can't be like, Mr. Deeds, thumbs up. Titanic, thumbs up. Those are not equal. Those movies are not equal. But I like Mr. Deeds. I like Titanic. But I would not put them on the same plane. You know? We simplified it for you. No. Even Facebook's realized people want like, not like, or they want like, angry. Wow. You know, all those different variations they have now. Netflix.
I actually read a little conspiracy kind of thing about how the reason they did that is because of some of their more recent Netflix specials not doing so well in terms of ratings, and then as a result, like not being viewed as often.
You mean like comedy specials?
Like comedy specials and some of their TV, like original series.
Yeah, they have a bunch of original series.
They put a ton of them things out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're winning with Stranger Things. So.
And there's also some really bad ones like The Iron Fist. And some of the more recent comedy specials.
I just watched Louis C.K.'s 2017. Holy, it's funny.
Yeah.
He is so irreverent. But how would you cite a Netflix special? I don't even, probably movie. Anyways, getting back to this. What is that little dot? You'll see that weird dot over here? What is that? Oh, it's this. What is that? Oh, it brings that out? Well, I don't like it on my screen. But y'all just know this is not a fleck on the screen. It's a triangle. A little tiny triangle that points this way. And this one over here is a little tiny triangle that points that way. Just in case you were wondering. So here's the order of things that are important to me, because the connection you're making between the two, the poem, story, and the real world issue, is the most important thing. Like if you were to write me a paper that had no poem or story in it, it was just a world issue, well, that's like a 1301 paper. Or if you had one that was just talking about the poem or story but never mentioned some problem in the real world, that's a synthesis analysis paper or critical evaluation. So the thesis is the most important thing to have. And it's got to mention the story, poem, mention the real world issue. Needs to make a claim about how these two completely different situations compare. So there is a lot of comparison contrast in it. And then it will need to directly state or imply why the comparison is being made. For example, showing what can be gathered from the story poem that would help solve the real world issue. And that's why it's got to be an ongoing world issue and not something like Trump's wall and Berlin's wall. Because I think the Berlin Wall came down like in the 80s, 90s?
80s.
80s, 86.
Yeah, so 86, 87, somewhere around there.
You know why? It's because my brother was born. That's, what do you call that in psychology, as she told you? You're mistaking coincidence for causality. My brother was born that year, therefore.
That's why it fell.
Huh?
That's why it fell.
That's why the wall fell. You know, like when you meet somebody who's from another state, right? Like I came from, where'd you come from? California?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, do you know like Keanu Reeves?
I do actually. Everyone in California knows each other.
See, he's joking. The true answer is no. And that's silly for you to even ask me that question. Or even like I know a guy from California, I'm like, hey, have you met John Simmons? He's in LA. And you're like, no, I don't know John. Just because I've been to the state, I know everybody there.
People actually say that all the time, and I feel like people don't realize that like Los Angeles County has like 1 million people in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it?
It's got over 1 million people.
I know
It's
it's
huge. It's like ridiculous.
Damn near like 4 or 5 million people in
It's
one
something
county.
like that. I know it's ridiculous huge. It's
Because
like
LA is the third largest city in the nation with like 2.5 million.
I'm talking about the whole county too.
Right, with 2.5 million in the
Yeah.
metro area.
Yeah.
That's going to be like 5 million, I would think.
It's something crazy like that. I know it has the.
I believe DFW is the second largest metroplex area in the entire country with 25 million people,
Really?
I think. With the whole metroplex area, the whole surrounding of the suburban, even all the way to Rockwall.
I'm pretty sure. I know that like I lived in it one time, and I remember like the county has like Los Angeles County in a whole has more people in it than a majority of states do. Like almost, except for the
Yeah, probably. But the key there is not to think that he knows everybody in California because he went there or like lived there once. Or for a long time, even a long time. Because like that's coincidence for causality. So never assume that because two things are close together, that means that they're necessarily directly connected. Colton, you had a question?
Yes, does the wall actually have to be an actual wall or a metaphorical barrier?
That depends. Give me the metaphorical barrier you're talking about.
U.S. and Russian relations. Past and recent.
You'd have to not do past, unless it was.
Don't
go older than 30 years.
No.
So don't go below 487, which is a lot of the problems we have.
Like 95 up.
95 up. Metaphorical wall. This is talking about something real, this poem is. There's always going to be a metaphorical wall. I think he's saying if you got rid of the wall, there's still the metaphorical wall of the property line, so there's no reason for us to ever build real property lines because there's no need for it. What is the metaphorical wall between Russia and the U.S.?
Basically, from...
If there's a policy you could tie to it, that could be like a policy wall.
That's what I'm getting at.
What's the policy?
The policy is, well, the difference between democracy and communism and why there needs to be something in between us and them. Like, we don't necessarily associate with them as much as we would like to, or they would like to with us, kind of know our differences. We don't want to really mess up. And on top of that, you know, Trump's recent attack, Russia backing Syria, all that good stuff. Russia's kind of backing away because of U.S. involvement. There's now another barrier built between us. I'll email you about it because I sent you a
Planning?
yeah.
So you plan, you set a planning on what? Saturday night or Sunday?
Saturday, yeah, Sunday. Sunday morning.
Saturday morning?
Sunday morning.
Oh. Yeah, I was like, no way, because I did know. I'll just look at it. Because now I'm trying to like visualize barriers in my head. I would think if there's a difference in policy, like we have our policy, they have theirs,
Yeah.
that wouldn't count. If we have some sort of policy like a sanction written specifically about the way in which we're supposed to relate, that would work. Because that's a written barrier between us. But just like, it's got to be about meeting the wall and, meeting at the wall and building it up again. That kind of issue. And the problem is if we have two different scenarios, one on either side of the wall, we're like, we're way over here and we do capitalism, you're over here and you do communism.
It would kind of work with the treaty we had in the Middle East.
Then we're not really talking about the wall, but like the wall is like more of an invisible one then. It's kind of like, well, I know that I've got all apple orchards here and I can go pick the apples whenever I want and I can sell those apples for however much I want. You've got the pines over there and everybody's given an equal distribution of pines all the time. I don't even know how their communism works anymore. Don't they elect people?
Kind of. It's weird.
Yeah, everybody always elects Putin.
Yeah.
And his advocate, like the
People get shot all the time randomly for no reason.
The
Who are involved with political
yes,
things.
the opposition, like his opposition, the people who are supposed to be running against him, the choice, they always end up mysteriously executed in the middle of the road at night.
I read one that said somebody fell off a building. I was like, come on. Like somebody who doesn't like Putin, who somehow has to do with political stuff, fell off a building.
Equal causation.
I guess that's true, but I mean, I just don't see a lot of people being on a building and it's like, look at the morning sunshine, whoa! And then just, how often does that happen?
I was reading a paper about a guy who critiqued his position in Syria, ended up sent out to the Stalin prison outer Siberia, and ended up out there for like almost a year. And then when he came back, he's like, well, I was really abused out there. And Pete's like, no, he just got sent out there for tax purposes. He was cheating on the taxes. It has nothing to do with the fact that he was criticizing my foreign policy.
Standard tax problem.
Yeah, exactly. Standard tax problem.
So I might end up saying because of your, like if, I know it says avoids vague language is specific about the claim, I may have something to say about the specificity if I don't think that the wall that you're talking about is specific enough. If it's a sanction between U.S. and Russia and their ability to interact with each other, that's one thing, but if it's just like, well, we're democracy, they're communism, that's different.
Well, it's not quite based on that, but,
okay.
There's, in Frost's poem, he talks about somebody loves the wall and also someone hates the wall. Somebody doesn't want the wall there, someone wants to keep it. That's kind of where I'm getting at. The only reason why is because there was a plethora of information on the subject between the two.
If you can find a specific sanction, but if there's like different like political barriers they put up, that's one thing. But if it's just like, well, we're over here doing our thing and they're over here doing their thing, I wouldn't think that would count. There'd have to be some sort of written agreement between them that tells them how to interact. That would be different.
It's nothing between the two differences of each other. It's how we interact. That's what it is.
Well, if that's true, then that probably would work because it's almost like a written wall.
Yeah.
That's been approved and ratified. Next, after having thesis, most important thing is, and here's this, I gotta show y'all this is how I grade the paper. Then what I do is I go from the thesis directly to the works cited page. I verify you have a thesis, then I go to your works cited page. Or at least an implied thesis. And then I go to your works cited page and I make sure it contains only sources used in the paper as much as I can. At least to the point where I have 5 of your outside sources are being cited. That's what I really pay attention to. Formatted properly, at least 6 citations. When I say, I mean 1 to 2 literary articles, 3 to 4 real world, and then 1 to textbook. I generally don't check for the textbook because I assume that's used, but if the textbook source isn't there, I'll count off for it, but just not as much as I would one of the other articles. So then I also have to make sure that sources are cited when claims are made within the paper. So this is essentially like your internal citation section. So I go and I check for a works cited page, I check for an internal citation. And here's like the difference between, I say in order of importance to grade. So if there's no thesis whatsoever, then you're not arguing a point between the real world issue and the poem, which means, I can't really grade it, right? Because it's not the paper, and I'll give you a 0 for that. And that's not likely to change unless you somehow add an argument to it. I also will not grade it at all if you're missing a works cited page. So if you forget to paste it to the end after having done the thesis planning, if you just forget to paste this at the end, then I won't grade it. I'll give you a 0 and say, please include the works cited. Or if you don't have internal citations that refer to the works cited page, and the sources are credible, valid, and purpose free of conflict of interest, that stuff comes later, but if you don't have the internal citations at all, I won't grade your paper still. So you have to have both this and that. And then after that, I'll look to make sure they're credible in as much as credibility is necessary. So for example, I may find that something you're saying about the birthmark and how it relates to cosmetic surgery and the psychology of people who get cosmetic surgery, or how it relates to bullying, as some people are doing that too, birthmark and bullying, and how that affects people. So I would expect to find somebody has done some academic journal research on bullying in schools or cosmetic surgery and its effect on people. People's sense of identity. That's stuff that's been written about. But with Trump's wall, that's only been around for like a year, right? The people are even talking about that. So if you're doing mending wall and Trump, you might mostly be using news sources. In fact, there might not be very many news sources on the databases. So I would say this person's using just mostly news sources from the internet, but I don't see how they have a way around that with this particular topic, which is incredibly recent and isn't going to have any academic journal research on it, because that takes a couple of years to write, get published, usually, except for Frost and Trump's wall academic journal articles on that. But newspapers, they happen a lot quicker, and they can get on the databases quicker. I really think for the Trump's wall paper, you'd find enough on the opposing viewpoints. With newspaper sources, I think there'd be plenty. But I would also let you do like some outside. If you were tired of just getting New York Times, Christian Science Monitor, and you wanted some stuff from the outside. So it just depends on the topic as to whether or not I need things to be incredibly credible. But I would expect them to be valid in their purpose and free of a conflict of interest to a point. As long as it seems to have the correct information, that's all I'm really looking for. Because you're arguing basically on information. Now, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I go back to it. This is flipped from 1301. Your logic is the next most important thing. So once I actually start reading the paper, that's all like prior to reading it. That's just checking you have the stuff there. Once I start reading, I expect your logic to be tested, accurate, free of personal bias, used effectively. So, if you're writing the Frost and Trump's wallpaper, and you're like, and basically Frost is saying that we need this wall, baby. I'm like, what? No, that's not what's happening at all. But you're like, but that's what I want to be the case. That's where my opinion would be a problem. So I want you to be free of that kind of stuff and use your argument effectively. So you need to have a story, poem, and real world issue relationship clearly delineated and explained. The sample paper does a great job of that. Even retelling the plot of the story, like giving a little bit of plot summary, but framing it within the townsfolk so it's easier to talk about the Westboro Baptist Church and relationship. Qualities of similarity are arrived at using creative and in-depth connections, which the sample paper does very well. I prefer if the relationship is semi-esoteric in nature. Esoteric just means not easily arrived at. So I also put the definition right after. But it's something that wouldn't be obvious. So that's just a preferred. So like, soldiers home in PTSD, I get a million of those papers. So that's probably not the esoteric ones. But I'd say, and I don't mean to call you out, Elijah, but Much Madness, Divinest Sense, and the problem of progressivism right now, that's one I haven't seen before. I'd say that's esoteric enough to count as like one I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't seen that before. But some of the others I have. And you can tell me later if you wish that I had not said that, and I will honor that wish and not do it again. I've already done it now, so it's like I can't take it back. No takesies backsies. Importance of relationship directly stated or implied to validate relationship. So we need to know why this relationship is important. So all of those things have to be done within the logic of your paper and the argument that you're making. But then after that, the sources need to be relevant, representative, typical, and sufficient. And to the point that you need information that helps, like, I mean, dates, people, things that are actually happening in the world. If you notice, that's all he has basically on Westboro Baptist Church, with the exception of maybe one article. He doesn't have like wide-scale studies. He just has information about what the Westboro Baptist Church has done. So he's not really using other people's arguments to make his case. He's using other people's information to build his argument. So you're not going to find people who are making the argument you're making and using those people to help make your argument like you might have in 1301. This is using information in a slightly different way. I would like, of course, mostly academic journal sources, but if I've told you your topic's okay with not having as much, that's fine. Provide enough research to prove points. I think it goes without saying, right? If you're going to prove a point, you have enough research to do that in that case. And don't rely mostly on one source, some rare case, or anecdotal evidence. Like, oh, there's one guy who thinks this, that goes against what everybody else is thinking. Now, it's really weird. Way down here, introduction. So the introduction may need to be multiple paragraphs in length in this case, but you might notice, like, if the paper just starts with a thesis, I won't like that very much, but it's already made it past much of the hurdles that you need to have, right? So maybe the person didn't introduce this whole topic at all. They just start talking about it. I'm like, oh, this is really not fun to start reading because there's no introduction, but I mean, I'll still read it. Whereas in the other cases, I kind of won't. But you're going to mention the most relevant aspects and plot elements of the story poem for understanding the comparison. So just whatever it is that the reader needs to get started. And mention the most relevant aspects and explain the necessary background information, the real world issue for understanding the comparison. I don't know if anybody remembers that I told you that I would love if this be used as like a sample writing, like when you try to go to like a different college, like when you go to like a 4-year, and like some of them will ask you like, well, give us a sample assignment in your from your school and show us like, you know, what you're capable of. And this would be a great assignment for that. So when I say mention the relevant aspects and plot elements of the story poem for understanding, and also the real world issue, that's going to be forever who might out there be reading that, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be written for, I mean, you know that I know what Minister's Blackmail is about, but you got to reframe it for whomever might be reading this paper who might not be an English teacher and might be able to make this connection. So you're not just thinking about the audience you have right now, but the audience that it might have later, which is weird. But it's got to appeal to all people at once. And then ethos, and I know this is weird to have all this stuff down at the very bottom, but this is really the stuff that I pay the least attention to. That the paper is free of spelling, grammatical, typographical errors. I make sure it's varied in style, needs to be by the person. And it's respectful to the reader and their viewpoints. In other words, don't insult the reader, who provide helpful transitions wherever possible. And that stuff down at the bottom, which is what a lot of students always think is the most important aspect of a paper, is the stuff that I don't pay as much attention to. If I give people 3 papers usually and I say, read these, tell me which one's the worst, people will say this one's the worst, when it's actually not. It's just got not great grammar. Because I'm looking for all the other elements first, before I'm looking at, he used the wrong form of there. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. You ever thought about that? What if Jesus had written all of his own books of the Bible, right? Right? He didn't. How many books of the Bible did Jesus write? 0. They were all his followers who wrote the books. What if the reason was that Jesus had atrocious grammar and spelling? Like he just couldn't lock it down, right? I mean, we consider him to be perfect, but like spiritually perfect. Does that mean he had bad grammar and spelling? He'd be like, I don't know about this Jesus now. The things he was saying, they were really nice and all, but I didn't realize he couldn't use the correct form of there. I don't even know like what to say about it. But that's how people are, and they shouldn't be. I mean, he was a great orator. We just don't know like to what degree he wrote or could write. He might have been able to write. I don't know. Yeah.
What's funny is that my dad and I actually had this conversation. The only time in the entire Gospels that Jesus ever writes anything was when he's drawing in the sand.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right before they were trying to stone the adulterous woman. And that was the scene where he tells them, you know, he who has not committed the first sin can throw the first stone. And then everybody drops their stones and walks away. That is the only scene in the entire Gospels where Jesus is writing anything at all. He's always speaking.
And what did he draw in the sand?
We don't know.
We don't know.
Jesus flying in the sand.
You know, interestingly enough, have you all ever heard of Socrates? So, I mean, you know Jesus, right? You know the story of a guy who, you know, spoke to a lot of people, had a lot of followers, and then was executed for those beliefs and having done all that preaching, right? And then there was Jesus, because I just told the story of Socrates. Happened to him too. He wasn't crucified. It was more of a he went in front of the city and like had to argue his case, and they executed him for corrupting the youth. But yeah, it's like almost the same story as like Jesus, with all the great like, you know, little details. Isn't it funny?
And he was also one of the wisest people.
Which we only know from Plato and Aristotle, because they're the ones who wrote about what he said. A lot of times we credit things to Socrates that were actually written by Plato, and there's no way to know.
Or Aristotle.
Right, or Aristotle. There's no way to know exactly what Socrates said or what Plato was attributing to Socrates, because he named the main character of his main work Socrates. Yeah. But you don't know if Socrates actually said it or if Plato's saying it, but using Socrates as a way to say it.
Some people argue that Socrates never even existed.
Let's take a look at something real quick. I want to show y'all real quick how I grade a research paper. And I may have shown you this before, but I want you to see it again before you get what ready for next time?
For peer review.
Like the whole draft of the paper for a peer review? Yeah. Because it's going to be due that night, right? Or for you guys Thursday night, right? But remember, first come, first serve on the research papers. Whoever gets them in first, I grade first. I've already got one in there right now. So once I finish all the plannings, the discussion posts, I'm grading that girl's research paper, and she turned it in on Sunday. No. Friday. Insane person. Insane in terms of figuring things out ahead of time. When I was a student, I would have been like, because I was very procrastinating. I'd wait until the last minute. I would have been like, how in the world do you have that done in so much time? Responsible? Like, care about my education? I'd be like, da. But the physical, how did you make yourself do it? That's what I'm asking. I still don't understand. It's like superhuman to me. Like, I still don't get it. Like how, but I'll grade it. I'm excited. I'm like, that early? Really? Oh, I just get excited about that kind of thing. Oh, crap. I shouldn't have mentioned somebody turned it. Now they're going to be like, it's me. 57 minutes. Okay, we'll probably delete something there. In fact, let's leave that up for a minute. So I'll go, what's this one for? And I'll listen and I'll go, oh, that's why. Delete that. Probably should delete me too, talking about deleting things. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about the research paper itself. Do one last quick look at it. Let's assume it's in PDF format, because I kind of look at it like in PDF format on the... I need to get just the paper. Yeah, it's closed. Because I prefer to do it like this. Oh, geez. Why is it doing all of it at once? That's not what I want. One page. Page width. Copy, new, paste. All right, let's say that this is the paper. I'll make it slightly smaller. Can y'all still see that? Okay. So here's what I always do. First I check and I kind of read to go, okay, we got Minister's Blackvale and Westboro Baptist Church, and then I think, can I make the connection? Yeah. Townsville, Minister's Blackvale. Let me verify. Minister's Blackvale, Westboro Baptist Church. And then I'll actually usually probably look for the fourth paragraph beginning to see if it has it, and it does. Nearly identical. Okay, good. Now I'm going to go check and make sure that because it's a research paper, it's got sources. So I literally just go down to the bottom. Oops. Control Enter. There we go, fixed. Let's search for Barrett. Are you mentioned in the paper? Yep, that's 1. Boone, 2. Ferris, I already saw that one, I think. 3. 4. Now I've seen enough where I'll actually grade it. If it's 3 or less, I won't, but if it's 4, I'll grade it. Because then I'll just knock off 20 points for missing a source. If it's got 4, but it needs 1 more. Hawthorne, well, I know Hawthorne's being talked about because I already saw Ministry Black fail, so I don't have to worry about that one. Scroll down. I mean, I guess I'll look for Bible. That's a weird source to cite, but he needs it. And then Jonson. Yep, he's citing all of those. All right, so now that I've verified he's cited all of his sources, now granted that that's the way that I search to make sure that you've included all of your sources internally, what does that mean you have to be really careful with in terms of authors' last names? Misspelling. Because, let's be honest, Jonson down here, Jonson, if he'd put, oh, that's Jonson in the paper, I'm like, nope, didn't use it. You know, if they spelled it like J-O-H-N Johnson, and it's actually spelled J-O-N-S-S, I really don't want to go through the effort this time of figuring out people's misspellings. Because last year, there was one student, I didn't mention this to the students last year, and they turned them in like misspelled all over the place. One student had 4 of the 5 names misspelled in the paper. So when I went looking, I was like, there's no way they thought that this was right. And so then I started doing a search for just parentheses. I was like, maybe I can find it this way. And I found all these parentheses that were related like with names that weren't right. Like this one was Bone. This one was Ferris with an A. This one was J-O-H-N Johnson. This one was like Friedman. Like it was all kinds of different ways of spelling a name that's quite obviously spelled for you in the citation. You just copy pasted. So probably the best method here is not to, I'll just spell it myself. But like especially like say if you're dyslexic, would be to maybe copy what you can tell is that last name and then paste it every time you use it rather than trying to spell it. Because I do have a lot of students who generally in a semester who are dyslexic, also many who are ADHD, and so I can imagine both of those would get in the way of being able to spell properly when trying to go from your works cited page to up in the page. So it might just be better to scroll down, copy, scroll up, paste. You can also do this in Microsoft Word. Did y'all know this? You can have your works cited that you have open, it's at the end of your document, right? You don't want to scroll up and down all the time. So you can do this, where you go to View, and you say New Window. Do y'all know what that is? When you do a new window, it'll open up another window of your document, and then what you do is you just flip back and forth between this window of your document, which is the same document, and that window of your document. So when you make a save change here, it also saves the change here because it's just 2 windows looking at the same document but different parts. That's something Microsoft Word will do. I don't know about Google Drive or Open Office. I don't know about any of that stuff. I think I've covered everything I have to cover today. Does everybody understand? So the rubric thing is on there on Blackboard, so you can find that. Make sure you bring some kind of draft of something to class next time, so you get your peer review points, right? I believe that anybody who's here for the peer review and stays for the peer review, if you don't have a paper, I ask you to leave. But if you're here for the peer review, I'll also be doing grading conference signups for week 14, day 2? 1? 2? Week 14, day 2 are grading conferences. We're in week 12. This is week 12, day 1. So 2 weeks, 2 days from today will be grading conferences, and I'll have a sign-up sheet first time next time.
So the labs are due next week.
Labs are due next Thursday, yes. Then revisions due Thursday after that. Y'all have a good one. Anybody like this freeform class today? Was that helpful?
Yeah, it was.
I don't know why the essay went through blank. I erased it back in.
Yeah, I thought it was weird. Like, it was weird because like it shouldn't have let you submit anything if there was nothing.
Yeah.
So it must have been like you submitted and then just something got cockamamie messed up. It was weird. I didn't figure it was anything you did. It was just it shouldn't even let anybody submit with a blank comment and a blank submission.
Yeah.
So I was like, something got messed up here, like a file got fluffed off the other way or something.
With the website or something.
Yeah, it was weird.